Hey, I'm USA Today bestselling author Jennifer Youngblood. I love writing clean and inspirational romance, much of which is infused with suspense. I'm so excited for y'all to listen to my audiobook, One Perfect Day. This is the first book in my Romeo Family Romance series. The book takes place in Park City, Utah. Enjoy all of the beautiful footage of Park City and the surrounding areas while you listen to the audiobook. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so that I'll be able to continue putting my audiobooks on YouTube, where you'll be able to listen to them for free. Enjoy!
One Perfect Day. Romeo Family Romance, Book 1. Written by Jennifer Youngblood. Narrated by Majel Connery. Chapter 1. A stab of uncertainty ran through Piper as she searched her brain. No, that can't be right. I double-checked the item numbers of the prints before I ordered them. Hot prickles rained down on her. She'd been so meticulous. Had Deidre given her the wrong information? She began sifting through the papers on the reception desk where she was sitting, searching for the sticky note where Deidre had written down the item numbers. Well, obviously you didn't, or you wouldn't have shipped the wrong ones. Deidre threw her hands in the air, leveling a hard glare. This is a disaster. Mac and Angie Wilbrook's anniversary party is tomorrow night. Mac was planning to present Angie with the prince. She rubbed her forehead, barking out a brittle laugh as she paced back and forth in front of the desk. She stopped in her tracks, balling her fists. I can't believe this is happening now, when we're in the middle of getting ready for Nolan's reception. Do you know how much clout Mac Wilbrook has in this town? Her voice went shrill. Do you? Piper flinched, drawing back. Mac seems like a reasonable person. I'm sure he'll understand that we made a mistake. Fire shot from Deidre's eyes. You made a mistake. Her head swung back and forth. How could you be so irresponsible? Piper's chest squeezed. Can we call the distributor and have them overnight the right prints? Piper felt like a condemned prisoner at the gallows, and her executioner was her diva boss. Piper winced at the crimson filling Deidre's fine-boned face. She looked like an overripe tomato about to burst. Sure, Deidre spat. The other ones only took, 3 weeks to get there? I'll call Mac and explain the situation. Piper continued searching through the items on the desk, looking for that blasted sticky note, which would hopefully get her off the hot seat. You bet you will, Deidre asserted. Piper bristled. She hated it when Deidre went on her rants, something that was becoming more frequent. Everyone makes mistakes, Piper said, fighting to keep her voice even. 6 months ago, when Piper first started working at the Landon Fine Art Gallery, she'd considered it a huge blessing to be able to learn from the celebrated owner, Deidre Landon, who was well-connected in the art world. Deidre had been impressed with Piper's photographs, saying that she saw loads of potential. Deidre assured Piper that if she worked hard and proved herself, that Deidre would help Piper get discovered. Deidre had allowed Piper to put a couple of her photographs in the gallery, but they were hanging on a rack in the back, hardly getting any attention. The only thing that kept Piper holding on was Deidre's assurance that she would hold a reception after the first of the year introducing Piper's photographs. I expected more from you. Disgust coated Deidre's voice. Piper felt a burst of adrenaline when she found the note stuck against the back of a catalog. Here it is, the note you left me. She held up the pink square of evidence. Let me just check these numbers against the ones in the order. Placing the note beside her keyboard, she began typing. Swift feelings of exultation ran through her. Here are the prints I ordered. They match the item numbers you wrote down. It was all Piper could do to keep her expression impassive. She turned the screen so that Deidre could see it. A furrow dented the strip of skin in between Deidre's sculpted brows. That can't be right. Let me see that note, she said briskly. Piper handed it to her, her insides swelling with victory. Would Deidre actually admit that she was wrong? Probably not. But at least she would realize that Piper wasn't to blame for the mishap. Deidre pointed. Aha! Here's the problem. I wrote down Summer Sunrise, Prince 1 and 2. The ones you ordered are called Daybreak. Was Deidre seriously going there? Piper's words rushed out. That's because the item numbers you wrote down were for the Daybreak prints. Deidre drew herself up, giving Piper a scathing look. You should have caught the discrepancy. Piper's spine stiffened. And you should have gotten the titles correct so as to avoid confusion. The air gathered tension as the two women eyed one another like gladiators about to face off. Yes, Piper wanted this opportunity, but she was tired of cowing to Deidre. Something hard and impenetrable flashed in Deidre's eyes, evidence of one who'd been bred to get her way. I beg your pardon, are you questioning me? Think of the long term, your goals. No, Piper swallowed the tightness in her throat. I'm only saying that I can see how I could have made the mistake. Deidre's hand went to her hip, a snarky smile twisting over her lips. So you're admitting that this is your mistake? An invisible noose tightened around Piper's neck as she clutched her throat. I acknowledge that I should have noticed the discrepancy between the titles and the item numbers. However, if you had gotten the titles correct to begin with, Deidre held up her hand. It doesn't matter whose mistake this is. What matters is that we solve the problem. Piper had to fight the urge to laugh out loud. Cruella de Vil was changing her tune now that she realized she was partly to blame for the mix-up. In the future, I expect you to come to me if you have any questions about an order, especially one so important. She gave Piper a steely look. Is that understood? A scene flashed through Piper's mind, her springing to her feet and slapping that superior look off Deidre Landon's face. Is that understood? Deidre asked again. Yes, was all Piper said. The urge to tell Deidre off was so strong that Piper could scarcely contain it. Think of your photography, the voice in her head screamed. Before coming to work for Deidre, Piper had spent 2 long years trying to get a foothold into the art world. The fact that she had 2 of her photographs in one of the most prestigious galleries in Park City, Utah, was huge. Never mind that the photos were buried in the back. Come the first of the year, Piper's work would be featured in this very gallery. Deidre had to know that if she didn't make good on her word, then Piper would quit. And Deidre didn't want that to happen. Piper worked her butt off, turning herself inside out to meet Deidre's often unreasonable demands. Call Mac Wilbrook. Apologize profusely. Tell him that we'll order the prints and have them shipped right away. If he wants to keep the ones he has, we'll sell them to him at a 60% discount. Then, call a florist and have a bouquet of roses sent to the Wilbrooks congratulating them on their anniversary. Piper nodded, jotting down the instructions. Deidre glanced around the empty gallery. Where's Scotty? The gallery had only been open 20 minutes and there hadn't been any customers. In the back, taking care of the new shipment that arrived this morning. Deidre brightened. The Rutledge collection? Yes, I believe so. At least one thing has gone right this morning. Make sure to get all of the inventory logged into the system. We won't put any of it out until after Nolan's reception. How are things going with that? Her words came out in short thrusts as she enunciated every word. I don't have to tell you how important this is. We can't afford any more mistakes. Piper raised her eyebrow. Got it, she snipped. So long as my instructions are clear. It gave her a slight feeling of vindication when she saw the hardening of Deidre's eyes. Piper's dad was always saying that you teach people how to treat you. It was good that Deidre realized that Piper was frustrated. She was dang frustrated, as a matter of fact. Yes, she wanted the opportunity that Deidre could give her, but she didn't want to be the woman's doormat. Did you contact the caterer? Deidre snipped. Yes, several times. They've assured me that everything is set. Sheesh, it was only Tuesday and Deidre was already obsessing over the details for the reception taking place this Friday, the day before Christmas Eve. Piper let out a long sigh. It was bound to be a long week. I want everything to be perfect for Nolan. Deidre's voice went soft and gooey the way it always did when she spoke of Nolan Vant. Piper fought the urge to roll her eyes. I'm sure it will be. It had better be, Deidre snapped. The reception was for Nolan Vant, the elusive photographer whose fame and fortune spanned the globe. 80% of all sales at the gallery came from Nolan Vant's photographs. Nolan was Deidre's boyfriend. She'd been raving about him for weeks. It would be nice to finally meet the man. Of course, Piper doubted that the real man could live up to the lofty picture Deidre had painted of him. He certainly wasn't much to look at. The only photo Piper had seen of Vant was taken when he was out on location. It was a side shot, obviously a candid. Vant was wearing sunglasses and had a rather obnoxious-looking beard. Not the sort of man Piper would have pictured with glamour girl Deidre Landon. Then again, Vant's tremendous success could make up for any lacking physical traits. When putting together the promotional materials for the reception, Piper asked Deidre if there was a better photo of Vant they could use. Deidre had laughed, saying that Nolan hated publicity and preferred to remain behind the camera. "I had to twist Nolan's arm to even get him to agree to this reception," Deidre said. "It's the first time in who knows how long that Nolan has made a public appearance, and it's happening right here in our humble gallery." There was nothing humble about Deidre or her gallery. Deidre came from old money. Her dad had helped her start the gallery. Deidre's problem was that she was pampered and spoiled. Everything had come too easily for her. Piper's gaze flickered over Deidre. As usual, she was the picture of perfection, like she'd just stepped out of a fashion magazine. Her long platinum hair that gleamed like water was owed to expensive hair products and the adept hand of a highly sought-after stylist who knew how to do highlights. Deidre was dressed in a white winter coat and matching pants, a Prada bag slung over her arm. She removed her sunglasses from her head. "Here's your mail." Piper handed her a stack of envelopes. Deidre glanced down, sifting through the envelopes in her hands. "I'm working a few hours in the office before heading to the airport to pick up Nolan." That was great news. Hopefully Deidre would be so preoccupied with her boyfriend that she would stay out of Piper's hair. Piper kept her voice casual as she asked, "Nolan's coming in today? I assumed that he'd get here on Thursday." Deidre's expression softened. "He's coming in early so we can spend time together." "Will you be bringing him by the gallery today?" "Nope. I plan to keep Nolan all to myself the next few days." Piper bit back a smile. "Have fun." "I will," Deidre sang as she strolled to the back, her heels clapping with every step. This time, Piper gave herself the pleasure of rolling her eyes. Deidre was a piece of work. Nothing like the kind, considerate boss she'd appeared to be when Piper first took the job. The bell over the door rang, signaling the arrival of a man and woman, the first customers of the day. Piper stood, a professional smile curving her lips. "Good morning," she said warmly. "Are you looking for anything in particular?" "Just browsing," the woman said with a hint of dismissal. Piper got it. People wanted to look around without being hounded by a sales associate. "If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask," she said cordially. "Thanks," the man replied, his expression a touch apologetic, as if to make up for the terseness of his wife. A little before noon, Scotty emerged from the back. "The cases are all unpacked," he announced, stepping up to the reception desk and handing Piper the packing slips. Aside from Deidre, Piper and Scotty were the only full-time employees at the gallery. Another woman, Gail Finley, worked part-time to help fill in when needed. "So," Scotty began, his dark eyes sparkling with mischief, "it sounds like the witch was on her broom this morning." Piper made a face as she glanced furtively toward the back area where Deidre's office was located. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Did you hear her? She accused me of mixing up an order when the bulk of it was her fault." Anger rushed back with a vengeance, souring her mouth. He shook his head. "Sounds about right. Did I hear correctly? Is she leaving soon?" "Yes," Piper whispered conspiratorially, "to pick up Nolan Vant from the airport." Scotty clucked his tongue as he shook his head. "Poor miserable chap. I wouldn't wish that Wozzeck on a snake." A giggle rose in Piper's throat as she put her hand to her mouth to stifle it. "Wozzeck? That's a new one." "It means idiot." "You're terrible," she said appraisingly, feeling vindicated that she wasn't the only one who had a hard time with Deidre. Scotty flashed a cheeky grin that revealed deep dimples as he began singing along to the tune of jingle bells playing in the background. The witch is gone, the witch is gone, the witch is gone all day. Oh, what fun we'll have today as long as the witch stays gone. Shh, she hissed. She's not gone yet. From England, Scotty was a combination of handsome and cute in a Hugh Jackman meets Adam Sandler sort of way. But there were no sparks. In Piper's eyes, he was just a friend. So, love, after the witch is gone, maybe we should swing by the chocolate shop and then grab lunch. Piper was amused. You mean swing by and grab Corey, and then we can get lunch? It was cute to see the color that stained Scotty's cheeks. Yep, just as she suspected, Scotty had a thing for Piper's roommate and best friend Corey, who worked at the chocolate and gift shop a few doors down. Piper threw Scotty a perceptive look. You know, you could just ask Corey on a date. Scotty laughed, his face turning redder. I'm working my way around to it, he winked. Just give me time. He cleared his throat. Don't say a word to her about my, intentions. I wouldn't dream of it. Piper made a zipping motion over her lips. Corey and Scotty would make a great couple. Corey needed to find a guy who was down to earth as opposed to her normal pretty boy model types. Word to the wise. You'd better act fast before another guy steps into the picture. Corey had recently split up with her boyfriend. With her vivid red hair, lively green eyes, and bubbly personality, Corey had a string of guys wanting to go out with her. Scotty's eyes widened. Yikes. I thought she'd at least wait a few days before finding a replacement for Axel, Piper supplied. His eyes rounded. Axel? What was he? The starring character in an action movie? She laughed. Oh no, Axel's too pretty to be an action star. He's more of the runway model type. She pursed her lips, posing. He straightened to his full height, pushing out his chest. Corey needs a real man, not some glass ornament type who can't move for fear of getting broken. I hear you. Just don't let any grass grow under your feet. She pumped her fist. I'm pulling for you, man. Good to know, he said with a cheeky grin. The speaker clicked. The music was replaced by Deidre's voice. I got Nolan's flight information and am surprising him at the airport. You go get him, girl, a woman said. Deidre's throaty laughter bounced around the cavernous space. I can't wait to get Nolan all to myself. No more camera crews or people around, just me and him. Piper and Scotty looked at one another, fighting laughter. The music for the gallery was controlled from Deidre's office. She must have hit something and was unaware that her phone conversation had overtaken the music and was being broadcast to the entire gallery. Scotty sat down on the edge of the desk, propping his leg up as he folded his arms over his chest. No wonder the poor chap travels the world taking photos. It's to escape her clutches. He jutted a thumb toward Deidre's office. Piper sniggered. Probably. You've got this, the other woman purred in a cultured tone that reeked of wealth. Maybe Nolan's coming into town to propose. Pleased laughter rumbled in Deidre's throat. You never know, she said coyly. The woman's voice shot up several octaves. Girl, you've been holding out on me. You'll be the toast of the town, a gallery owner joining forces with Nolan Vant. You'll be unstoppable. That's the plan, Deidre trilled. Darling, I need to let you go. I've got to get to the airport. Have fun, the woman chirped. Don't do anything I wouldn't. Don't worry, Deidre sang. Ciao. There was a click as she ended the call. Scotty held up a finger. Aha! The truth comes out. Nolan Vant's exclusive deal is up for renewal the 1st of next month. If Deidre can trap him into marriage, she really will be unstoppable. Piper's eyes widened. Do you really think Deidre would stoop so low as to marry a man just to sell his art? He shrugged. It's Deidre we're talking about. Who knows how low she'll stoop? Maybe you're right, Piper said with a shrug. Deidre was power-hungry, but she seemed crazy about Nolan Vant. It was hard to say what Deidre's motivations were. A couple seconds later, Deidre strolled into the gallery area and up to the reception desk. She turned to Scotty. How did it go with the new shipment? Were there any damaged items? Nope, all good. How did the conversation go with Mac Wilbrook? Deidre asked, homing in on Piper. Surprisingly well. He was gracious. He does want the prints he already has and is grateful for the discount. Good. Deidre punched out the words like she was checking off a list. Did you order the roses? Yes. Sheesh, hadn't Piper repeatedly proven that she was capable? Get the inventory done, Deidre ordered. Piper nodded. Well, I'm off, Deidre said brightly. She walked a couple steps before stopping and tilting her head. What happened to the music? Amusement flashed over Scotty's features as he looked at Piper, who was trying to keep a straight face. I'm sure it's just a glitch. I'll look into it, Scotty said smoothly. See that you do. It's much too quiet in here, Deidre shuddered. Customers will hate it. Yes, the silence would be a travesty, Scotty said dryly as he looked at Piper. Deidre's eyes narrowed like she was trying to decide if Scotty was making fun of her. Fix it, Deidre commanded as she turned on her heel and marched out, her shoes clacking. Scotty folded his arms as he sighed. Remind me why I keep working here. Same reason as me, Piper quipped, because Deidre promised us that she'll feature our work. He cocked his head. Do you think she'll follow through? Piper shrugged. Time will tell. She promised me the first of the year. She promised me spring. Scotty pulled a face as he held up his hands. The real question is, can I keep from wringing her scrawny neck before then? At the rate she's going, I'm not sure, Piper laughed. Scotty put his hands together. Well, let's go to lunch. As tempting as that is, one of us should stay here. Why don't you just bring me something back? A teasing smile tugged at her lips. Maybe some chocolate? A broad grin split Scotty's face. I like the way you think, love. I'll throw a sandwich into the mix, too. Piper wrinkled her nose. You know what? On second thought, I'll just go and grab lunch after you get back. It'll do me some good to get out of this place for an hour. Amen, Scotty boomed. He pumped his eyebrows. Wish me luck at the chocolate shop. Piper waved a hand. You don't need luck. Just throw a few of those sexy loves into the conversation. With your accent, you'll have her eating out of the palm of your hand. I can only hope. He went a few steps, then stopped. The music. Yeah, better fix that. Customers will hate it, she said, mimicking Deidre. He saluted and went that direction. Piper's stomach rumbled. She touched it before turning her attention to the packing slips. Her hunger would have to wait until Scotty returned. In the meantime, she'd log in the inventory. When the music came back on, Piper found herself humming along to the Christmas song playing. She was excited about Christmas and was looking forward to spending time with her family. Also, she was excited to get a break from Deidre. Piper could only hope that Nolan Vant would keep her preoccupied so that Piper and Scotty could have a little room to breathe. Would Deidre make good on her promise and feature Piper's photography? Or was working for Deidre and putting up with her crap a colossal waste of time and energy? Only time would tell. Chapter 2. As Piper left the sandwich shop, she turned her face upward to the sun, appreciating the warmth on her skin. One of the things she loved most about the winters in Park City was how picturesque everything was with the gleaming snow and quaint Western-style buildings lining Main Street. This year there had been lots of snow, making the ski resort owners and tourists happy with all the fresh powder. The sidewalks were bustling with tourists, donning brightly colored coats, scarves, and hats. Many an arm was loaded down with various-sized shopping bags, and the chill air brimmed with the excitement of the approaching holiday. Piper's eye caught on a large wreath adorned with red ribbon that graced the center of a restaurant door. She took a mental snapshot, thinking how she would frame the picture if she had her camera. The red bricks on the building would contrast nicely with the greenery on the wreath, giving the photo an ironic, homey but urban twist. She chuckled inwardly, thinking that if Corey were with her right now, she'd admonish Piper to put away the camera, literally or figuratively, and just enjoy the experience. There's more to life than a career, Corey always said. Piper let out a long sigh. Maybe she should be more like Corey, who was content with her job as a sales clerk. Piper's mother was always saying that Piper's ambition was eating away at her. Piper supposed that was true. Photography was her passion. Was it wrong to want to be successful at doing something she loved? Piper's mother and Corey were always encouraging Piper to get out more and date. Maybe Piper would if she could find anyone worth dating. She glanced at the chocolate shop, trying to decide if she wanted to pop in and say hello to her roommate or just enjoy spending time by herself. She chose the latter. Piper had only been gone 30 minutes. She planned to take the entire hour for lunch. She took in a deep breath, her lungs feeling the punch of the crisp, cold air as she strolled along the sidewalk, nodding and smiling at the people passing in the other direction. She made her way down to one of her favorite spots, an open area that led to the town's ski lift. Her eyes skimmed over the stretch of gleaming snow, glistening like diamonds in the bright sunlight. Laughter from children playing nearby drifted in the light breeze. She spotted an empty bench and was headed that direction when something cold hit her in the face. She gasped. Pain streaked across her cheek as her brain registered what was happening. She'd been pelted with a snowball. She jerked around in the direction it had come, only to get hit again, this time in the head. She gasped, shielding her face. More snowballs pinged her, one lodging in her mouth. She spit it out, sputtering. What the heck? A group of boys were throwing snowballs at her. Indignation swelled inside her. Seriously? She huffed. She glared at them, expecting them to be quelled by her wrath, but then realized their attention was fixed on something or someone behind her. She turned to see a tall, athletic guy wearing a charcoal gray coat and black beanie hat. A jolt shot through her. He was handsome, in the rugged, not too pretty way she liked. He caught eyes with her, giving her a sheepish grin. He looked past her. "Hey, guys," he said as he held up his hands in a truce. "You caught someone in the crossfire." "Not just someone," Piper countered. "Me." She shot him an indignant glare. Good-looking or not, the man should be ashamed of himself for egging on these kids and getting innocent bystanders caught in the middle of their snowball fight. This was a public place, after all. More snowballs came hurling through the air like cold bullets. Some hit the guy. Others hit Piper in the back and head. "Watch out!" she shouted. The guy laughed. "You could help." Piper's jaw went slack. "What?" The guy motioned at the group of boys who were bent over, refueling their snowballs. "It's me against all of them. You could help." Piper grunted. The nerve of this guy. She straightened to her full height, giving him a withering look. "I don't think so," she muttered, about to continue walking. "Listen to the little sissy," one of the boys taunted, "asking a girl for help." The guy chuckled. "Did you hear that? Are you going to let him talk to you that way?" For an instant, Piper was floored. Her eyes connected with the guy as a sizzle of awareness traced through her. His adventurous expression called to her inner child, breaking up the last of the tension ball inside her that had formed earlier when Deidre went on her rampage. A grin stole over Piper's lips as she made a split-second decision. "No, I'm not." She bent over and began hastily making snowballs. "It's a war!" a boy shouted with glee. Piper began hurling snowballs at the kids. "Take that, you little menaces," she squealed, averting her face as an arsenal of snowballs came flying at her. "Fall back," the guy directed as he rushed to her side, grabbed her arm and pulled her to a park bench. They ducked behind it, hastily making more snowballs. When they had a decent stash, the guy's golden-green eyes took on a wicked glint. "You ready?" "Let's do it," she said, a surge of adrenaline running through her as they began hurling snowballs at the boys. It wasn't long before they had the boys retreating. Finally, it was the boys who yelled truce. "That was impressive," the guy observed with a large smile that revealed neat rows of sparkling teeth. A shot of warmth ran through Piper as she returned his smile. Thanks. We make a pretty good team. A wide, reckless smile filled his face, causing the lines around his eyes to crinkle. Not bad for someone who was on the fence. He winked. Yeah, not bad, she chuckled, surprised at how her heart had picked up its beat. What was it about this guy that had her so worked up? The 4 boys gathered around them. The ringleader frowned as he made a fist and nudged the guy in the arm. We would have taken you had she not stepped in. The guy's eyes widened in mock shock. What? Are my ears deceiving me? Is my nephew actually giving credit to a girl? He grabbed the boy and ruffled his hair. They scuffled for a minute before the boy escaped. No way, the boy scoffed. Then he grinned, shooting Piper an impish look. You're pretty good, for a girl. Laughter rose in her throat. Thanks, I think. The guy caught eyes with her. I'm Noah. I'm Piper. He held out his gloved hand. Also wearing gloves, Piper extended her hand as they shook. Nice to meet you, Piper. Everything seemed to slow, like a camera lens coming into focus on the primary subject. Nice to meet you, Noah. She couldn't quite place his accent. Was he from the South? There was only a hint of something so slight she couldn't pinpoint the region. Noah motioned. This is my nephew Milo and a few of his buddies. The fresh young faces gave her mildly interested nods of acknowledgement. Hey, can we go and get some ice cream? Milo asked, as all eyes turned to Noah. I suppose. Noah heaved out a dramatic sigh as he reached in his back pocket, removed his wallet, and pulled out a couple of $20 bills. All right, Milo boomed as he eagerly grabbed the money. With that, the boys took off. Bring me back the change, Noah called after them. We will, Milo responded in a sing-song voice. Amusement quivered on Piper's lips. I doubt you'll have much left. I imagine those boys can eat a lot. You're probably right. He agreed so casually that Piper suspected he didn't really care about the money. Noah placed his wallet back into his pocket. So, he began with a boyish grin that caused her heart to skip a beat. Tell me about yourself. What do you do when you're not launching snowballs at rowdy 10 and 11-year-olds? The sparkle in his arresting eyes was infectious, causing a grin to slide over her lips. Oh no, Snowboy. You don't get the information fed to you on a silver platter. A deep, full-throated laugh rumbled out, indicative of one who lived fully in the moment. What must it be like to be so content with the present? Piper knew she was making assumptions, but that's the read she got on Noah. Snowboy, huh? You know, he mused, pursing his lips as he studied her. What? She asked, tucking a dark curl behind her ear. She'd let her shoulder-length hair do its thing and go curly today. She would give anything to read his thoughts right now. Did he like what he saw? She certainly did. His gaze was penetrating, exhilarating. You throw pretty well, for a girl. His eyes lit with teasing. Ah, a sexist, Snowboy. I see how you are. Dark strands of hair were peeking out beneath his beanie. Piper wanted to yank it off to see what he looked like. He was so ruggedly handsome with his even features and strong jawline. The kind of man who commanded attention in any environment. Yet he was free and easy rather than overbearing. The kind of man whose laces were never tied too tight. She laughed inwardly. Okay, that assessment was premature, especially since she didn't even know Noah. He would obviously have flaws. What were those flaws? Did she need to be worried? Maybe she was setting herself up for failure here, using her mental camera to reshape reality into her version of perfect. Piper shrugged off the nagging thoughts, not wanting to obsess over what the future might or might not hold. She wanted to be more like Corey and just go with the flow, enjoy spending time with this dreamboat. He pumped his eyebrows. I'm an equal opportunity, Snowboy. His voice took on a husky edge as he leaned closer, with a distinct appreciation for the opposite sex, especially when she's as beautiful as you. Tingles spiraled down Piper's spine, bringing with them a rush of heat. Her gaze traced his broad shoulders and lean frame. Dang it, he was attractive. The southern twang was more pronounced that time. It was sexy. She realized that he was waiting for her response. "Thanks," she stammered, wondering if he also felt the zings of attraction ping-ponging between them. "How about you? What do you do when you're not pummeling an innocent bystander with snowballs?" She glanced at his lips, wondering how he would react if she kissed him right now. A crooked grin pulled at his lips. "Innocent bystander?" His head dipped as he assessed her. "You crossed the line and left that status the moment you picked up those snowballs." She gave him a begrudging smile. "Touché." He motioned in the direction the boys had gone. "So, can I interest you in some ice cream?" By Piper's mental estimation, her hour was almost up. Then again, it wasn't like Scotty was keeping track of the time. He'd taken longer than an hour. The sun was shining. She just indulged in a snowball fight. She felt a streak of recklessness. Maybe it was time to let her hair down and bend the rules a little. "You know you want more," he urged. She lifted an eyebrow. "Ice cream? When it's 30-something degrees outside?" "Ice cream's always a good idea." "You're an ice cream lover, then?" He grinned like a kid. "Yep." "What flavor?" Amusement creased his features. "Is this some sort of test?" The corners of her lips quivered. "You bet." "Strawberry." She shrugged. "Strawberry's okay." His eyebrow shot up. "What flavor do you like?" "Definitely chocolate." He rewarded her with a brilliant smile. "Chocolate and strawberry go well together, don't you think?" She blinked, realizing his implication. It sent a burst of pleasure through her. "Absolutely." Who was this guy? Some gift from heaven? To think that Piper had just been complaining to Corey about not being able to find guys that she connected with. Well, she was having to change her tune. "Shall we?" Noah asked. He had the curious combination of being refined and blissfully spontaneous. "Okay, you talked me into it." They began walking in the direction of the ice cream shop. She matched Noah's easy stride as the two moved side by side. "Are you visiting Park City?" Noah asked. "Trying to get more information, I see," she quipped, shooting him a teasing grin. "You can't blame a guy for trying," he said pleasantly. "How about you? Are you visiting?" "Please say you live here." "Yes, I am." Her heart dropped as she swallowed. Of course, he was visiting. Fate wouldn't be so kind as to drop a guy like this in her lap for the long term. Moments like this didn't happen every day. They were exquisitely rare, making Piper want to savor every morsel. "Where are you from?" "Now who's the one trying to get information?" A smile tipped her lips. "I suppose one of us has to cave or we'll go on like this all day." "All day. I like the sound of that." "I do too," Piper admitted, her lips pulling down. "Unfortunately, duty calls." Interest percolated in his voice. "Duty? What type of duty?" "Work." "Ah, so you live here?" "Yes, I do." She smiled as she answered. "I gave you that one. Now it's your turn to divulge something to me." They crossed the street and went down the sidewalk. "Which ice cream shop are we going to?" "You mean there's more than one?" She laughed. "There are probably half a dozen on Main Street." His eyes widened. "Oh man, I hope I can find the one Milo and his buddies went to. If I lose my nephew, my sister will kill me. After she hangs me up by my toenails." A chortle rumbled in her throat. "The closest one is a few doors down. I suspect that's where the boys went." He grimaced. "I hope you're right." "You have a sister who lives here?" "Yes." "You're visiting her for Christmas?" she surmised. "Yep. Chalk one up for you." "Visiting from where?" She was itching to know more about him. When they reached the ice cream shop, Noah opened the door for her. "Thank you," she said as she stepped into the shop. "You're a gentleman, I see." He nodded. "Of course." Milo and his friends were sitting at a table. When they saw Noah and Piper, they waved. "It seems that I'll live another day," Noah said with a breath of relief. "Yes," Piper laughed, "and you'll get to keep all your toenails." "Whew," he exhaled, swiping a hand across his forehead. She shook her head, grinning. "How's the ice cream?" Noah asked loudly. He removed his gloves as Piper did the same. Milo held up his cone. "Delicious! Thanks, Uncle Noah," he grinned. A round of parroted thanks ran through the guys. "You're welcome," Noah said offhandedly as he placed a hand on Piper's back, navigating her to the back of the line. The gesture felt so natural, and yet it was exhilarating. Was Noah real or merely a figment of her overactive imagination? He was handsome, considerate, good with kids, conversational. Piper's rational mind brought back up the point that she knew very little about him. It was too soon to dub him perfect. However, her heart was insistent on shouting otherwise. The shop was busy, alive with the lively chatter of patrons. "It seems like you're not the only one who has an ice cream fetish," Piper remarked. A grin slid over Noah's lips, making him look boyishly adorable. "It's the American way." Once they had their ice cream, they sat down at an empty table near Milo and his friends. Noah took a large bite of his strawberry ice cream. That's good. How's yours?" "Really good." "Let me try a bite." Her insides tightened in surprise. Sharing ice cream felt intimate. Then again, she'd contemplated a few short minutes earlier how it would be to kiss Noah. It seemed silly to balk at sharing food. "Sure." She held it out to him. He leaned over and took a generous bite. "What do you think?" she asked. "It's good," he said lightly. "Not as good as the strawberry, but good." "I don't believe that. Let me try yours." She leaned forward as he held it out. She took a large bite, the sweet tartness of the berries zinging against her taste buds. She swallowed, licking her lips. "Wow, that's good." "Yep, better than the chocolate," he said confidently. "Yes, it is," she admitted. He pushed out a heavy breath. "If I were a real gentleman, I'd trade you." She wrinkled her nose. "I don't expect you to do that." His eyes danced with laughter. "Phew, that's a relief because this is too good to trade." A giggle rose in her throat. She shook her head, taking another bite of ice cream. "I guess I'll have to make do with the chocolate." Piper couldn't remember the last time she'd had this much fun, and all they were doing was eating ice cream. "You were about to tell me where you're from." "I was?" His expression was one of mock confusion. "Yes, you were." She sat back in her seat, eyeing him with an expression she hoped would convey that she wasn't letting him off the hook. "Boulder, Colorado." She frowned. "Really?" Amusement colored his features. "You don't like Boulder? It's very similar to here." "Yes, it is," she agreed, rushing on. "It's just that I thought I detected a Southern accent." He gave her a congratulatory look. "I grew up in Nashville." Piper was rather pleased with herself. "Yep, I heard the twang. To hear my siblings talk, I've lost nearly all of it." "It's still there." A grin tugged at her lips. "A smidgen." She switched gears, thinking of Boulder, Colorado. "Do you ski?" "Do I ski?" He wiggled his eyebrows. "Does a cat have a climbing gear?" She shook her head, laughing. "All right, funny guy, what do you do for a living? A comedy act?" "I'm afraid I'd starve," he said drolly. "I doubt that." She waited for him to answer. When he didn't, she leaned forward. "So, what do you do for a living?" A faint amusement twinkled in the depths of his eyes. "I'm a trust fund baby." She rocked back. "Really?" Her insides tightened. Kudos to him for having everything handed to him, but how was she supposed to find any commonality with that? Her dismay must have shown on her face because he chuckled. "Just joking. I'm not a trust fund baby." She shook her head. Funny, she said dryly. She sat back. What do you do? He wagged a finger. Oh no, you got one answer, now it's my turn. What do you do for a living? She made a face. You don't want to hear about me. I'm boring. Trust me, nothing about you is boring. His eyes caressed hers. Her eyelashes fluttered as she blinked several times. Was this really happening? It was magical, surreal. She kept expecting to wake up from a nap and find herself back at the gallery with her dragon boss breathing down her neck. Thank you, she finally said. I work at an art gallery. His eyebrow lifted and she could sense his interest. Oh, which one? He took another bite of ice cream. The Landon Gallery. It's just up the street. I was on my lunch break when our paths collided. A smile curved his lips. I prefer to think of it as connected. Huh? When our paths connected. He gave her a meaningful look. Remind me to thank Milo and his buddies for initiating that snowball fight. A bubble of happiness burst in Piper's chest, spreading a warm glow throughout her body. She'd heard of instant connections and love at first sight, but it had never happened to her. Until now. This was strange and thrilling. She took another bite of ice cream. What type of work do you do at the Landon Gallery? I wear lots of hats, from running the floor and waiting on customers to ordering inventory and paying invoices. In a nutshell, I'm the owner's assistant. Are you an artist? A photographer. His eyes rounded. That's impressive. What type of photography do you do? People mostly. A few landscapes. Is your work in the gallery? She grunted. I have a couple of prints tucked away in the back. Someone would have to go digging through the racks to find them. Well, at least it's a start. The Landon Gallery is hard to get into. Yes, it is. She tipped her head. You must know a little something about art if you know that. I've visited the Landon Gallery a few times. Piper choked on her ice cream. Noah cast her a concerned look. Are you okay? I'm fine. She coughed again, hitting the center of her chest. Sorry, that bite went down the wrong way. Noah hadn't been in the gallery when Piper was there. His was a face she would remember. When did you last visit the gallery? He looked thoughtful. Last year sometime? Oh, that explains it. I've only been there for 6 months. You'll have to come in again. I'll do that. I'll have to check out your photographs. You're kind. Her voice swung upward. You should come back after the first of the year. The owner of the gallery is hosting a coming out reception for me in either January or February. Done. It's a date. You just say the word. Noah took his last bite of the cone, wiping his hands on a napkin. Piper liked how he'd called it a date. It ran through her mind that a tentative date in the future felt hollow. We're having a reception this Friday, she blurted, desperate to have a concrete opportunity for them to meet up again. His expression tightened, making her fear that she'd overstepped. It's for Nolan Vant, our most popular photographer. Her words gushed out in a nervous jumble as she laughed. While I'm not a big fan of Vant's work, everyone else seems to love it. I know it's the day before Christmas Eve and you probably already have plans. His brows darted together. Nolan Vant, the landscape photographer? Yes. She finished off her cone, making sure to keep her mouth closed as she chewed. Sheesh, it was hard to be delicate when she was chomping the cone. He frowned. You don't like his work? She swallowed the food down. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. In the world of digital photography, I admire anyone who works in film. There's a certain artistry in the old school technique. He sat back, looking thoughtful. What do you shoot with? A medium format camera. Mamiya RB67. It occurred to her that he probably knew nothing about cameras. She offered a sheepish grin. I'm getting off track. What were we talking about? It was hard to hold her train of thought with him so close and gazing at her with such adoration. She felt like she might melt into a puddle of goo on the spot. You were telling me why you don't like Vant's work. Oh, yeah. She shifted in her seat. His stuff is okay if you like watered-down commercialism. She rolled her eyes. Let's be honest. How many renditions of Daybreak or Sunrise can a person do before it starts to get monotonous? She rushed on, answering her own question with a chuckle. Evidently a lot if you're Nolan Vant. His early works are genius, but now it just seems like he's churning them out fast to make a buck. She realized that she was blabbering like an imbecile. Noah was looking at her funny. She waved a hand. I'm sorry. I tend to ramble when talking about photography. I don't mind. I admire your passion. You do? I do. Tell me about your photos. Really? She searched his handsome face. I'm not boring you stiff? Not at all. I want to learn all about Piper. He grinned. I don't even know your last name. Kell. Piper Kell. He spoke as though he were committing it to memory. What's your last name? Romeo. Her eyes rounded, laughter gurgling in her throat. Romeo? She half expected him to say he was joking. Are you serious? Yep. She flattened her lips. I don't believe you. His eyes twinkled with laughter. Would you like to see my license? Yes, I would. All right. He leaned to one side as he removed his wallet from his back pocket. He held it open, showing his license, tucked inside a clear plastic sleeve. There it was. Noah Romeo with a Colorado license. Noah Romeo. It has a nice ring to it. I like to think so. Her eyebrows slid up. So, Noah Romeo, are you a Romeo? She teased, but there was an underlying element of truth to the question. What do you mean? Do you play the field? His answer was immediate. Nope, that honor belongs to my brother Jackson. The sincerity of his words was comforting. Good to know. She couldn't stop the smile that spread over her lips. A couple minutes later, Piper's heart clutched as she glanced at the clock on the wall. She needed to get back to the gallery, but she didn't want to leave Noah for fear that she might not see him again. Was she actually awake? Or was this all just a dream? It felt like a dream. Too good to be real. Piper pushed aside the negative thought, refusing to let it take root. Why couldn't she meet a terrific guy that she clicked with? It happened to people all the time. Why not her? Yes, she had to keep thinking positive thoughts. I hate to say it, but I need to get back to work. Ask for my number, she silently pleaded as she scooted back her chair, preparing to stand. He touched her hand, sending a tingle through her when their skin connected. Don't go. His eyes held hers. Spend the day with me. Oh, how she wanted to. All she could think about was how his hand felt over hers, his warmth flowing into her. She let out a hesitant laugh. I wish I could. Could she spend the day with him? The idea rolled around in her head, sparking hope. Deidre was gone for the day, preoccupied with Nolan Vant. Scotty probably wouldn't mind. If there were any day that Piper could play hooky, it was today. Everything was set for the reception on Friday, and she'd gotten all the inventory logged in. All she would be doing the remainder of the day was helping customers, which Scotty could do. Noah leaned forward. Think about it. Me and you, sharing a perfect day. Okay, she heard herself say dreamily. His eyes lit with pleasure, rimming them in gold. You will? Let me call my coworker and make sure he can cover for me. Sure. His eyes sparked excitement. How do you feel about tubing? Tubing? As in riding an inner tube down a hill? Yep. A large smile spread over his lips. I promised Milo and his friends that I'd take them tubing. A lopsided grin pulled at the corner of his lips. Piper didn't care what they did as long as she got to spend more time with Noah. All right, I'm game. She reached into her coat pocket to retrieve her phone. Let me just make a quick phone call. She thought of something else. Oh, I'll need to get my purse from the gallery if we're spending the rest of the day together. Piper lived only a few blocks away from the gallery and had walked to work this morning. At least she wouldn't have to worry about her car. Sounds good. He hesitated. Do you want me to go with you to get it, or should I stay here and keep these turkeys out of trouble? Piper could tell that Noah preferred to stay here, and that was probably better. Scotty was already going to tease her relentlessly when he realized she was ditching work to spend the day with a guy she'd just met. Piper preferred to just speak to him alone about it. You know what, since I'm grabbing my purse, I'll just talk to Scotty in person instead of calling him. He frowned. Scotty? The faint hint of jealousy in his voice gave her a sense of pleasure. My coworker. Oh. He looked relieved. All right, I'll see you soon. He winked. Turn your hat around. It took her a second to realize the meaning of his words. It was his way of saying, hurry back. Will do. As she was walking away from the table, she heard one of the boys ask, Is your girlfriend leaving? His voice was laced with teasing. Noah didn't skip a beat. Don't y'all worry. She'll be right back. We're spending the day together. Piper grinned, her feet hardly touching the ground. She couldn't get to the gallery and back fast enough. As she stepped out into the nippy air, she looked up at the bright coin shining in the clear azure sky. Yes, indeed, a perfect day, she hummed. Chapter 3. Piper's throat tightened as her eyes spanned the length of the steep slope that stretched farther into the distance than the eye could see. Tubing hadn't seemed like a big deal in theory. However, now that they were at the top of the snow-covered lane they were about to go down, it was disconcerting. Corey had been pestering Piper to take ski lessons, but Piper was a wimp. Just riding the ski lift up to their current location had been petrifying, although she'd done a pretty good job of hiding her fear, if she did say so herself. Are you okay? The concern that flickered across Noah's chiseled features was touching. Piper threw him a tight smile. I'm fine. Maybe she was more transparent than she thought. Liar, Noah drawled, amusement sprinkling his perceptive eyes with gold flecks. Okay, I'm a little apprehensive, she admitted, impressed that he could pick up on her feelings. Interesting that she felt so connected to Noah. Noah stepped closer to her. I'll be with you the entire time. Her heart pumped faster at his nearness. For a second, she forgot about the glittering slope and the people around them. It was just her and Noah, cocooned in this incredible chemistry. They were at a park that rented inner tubes. The lanes were smooth and sectioned off, which made her feel a little more at ease. She and Noah were riding down together. They were near the front of the line with only two couples in front of Milo and his friends, who were each going down separately. Noah's phone buzzed from inside the front pocket of his jeans. He'd gotten several calls when they were on the ski lift, but he ignored them. He fished the phone out and looked at the screen. Piper tried to get a read on his expression. She detected a slight tightness of annoyance around his eyes and mouth. You can get that if you need to. Nah, it's just work. It can wait, he said. In fact, I'll put the phone on silent so we won't be bothered anymore. Just like that, the tension faded, giving way to a magnetic smile that caused her heart to flip. Noah was handsome anyway, but when he smiled, it nearly took her breath away. Piper's mom was a huge Dennis Quaid fan. Noah reminded her of a young Dennis Quaid, an all-American heartthrob. Curiosity was nipping at her insides. You never did tell me what you do. Milo and his friends were up. Noah looked past her to the boys. DDSS, he cautioned. Got it, Milo said exuberantly as he got in his inner tube and zoomed away with a loud whoop. His friends hopped in their tubes and went after him. DDSS? Piper asked. Noah's face creased into a grin. Don't do stupid stuff, because if you do, you'll pay the stupid tax. She giggled. DDSS, I'll have to remember that. I certainly don't like paying the stupid tax, she quipped. He pulled a face. Me neither. My dad's always saying that to me and my siblings. Zoe says it all the time to her kids. Zoe? My sister. Noah positioned the tube. You get in first, he said, holding it in place. The tube was elongated like a fat figure eight with seats in the front and back and handles on the sides. Piper's heart was thumping as she got in, partly from what they were about to do and partly from knowing that Noah was behind her. Her cells did a mad dance when he sat down and scooted in close. She wondered if he could hear her heart pumping erratically. She sucked in a quick breath, trying to regain her composure. Relax, he urged. Tentatively, she rested her back against his hard chest, clutching the handles. Piper's senses were so deliciously alive, making her hyper-aware of him behind her. Noah gave them a shove, and they were off. Her stomach dropped as they sailed over the packed snow, the cold air kissing her face. Rapturous laughter pealed in her throat as she embraced the thrill of the experience. Noah's warmth blanketed her from behind as they soared down the slope. When they got to the bottom, the tube slowed and came to a stop. That was awesome, Piper said with a note of exultation, about to get out of the tube. Noah's strong arms encircled hers as he pulled her to him. Yes, it was, he murmured, his warm breath tickling her ear. Dizzying currents hopscotched over her skin as ribbons of heat cascaded through her stomach. Sheesh, he was incredible. Were her feelings so intense because this was new and spontaneous, or would it always be like this? It had only been a couple hours, but those precious hours were a great reminder that Piper needed to be less consumed with her career and more willing to enjoy those spontaneous moments that gave zest to life. Speaking of enjoyment, it was heaven to have Noah's arms around her. She sensed his reluctance as he let her go, and they got out of the tube. Milo and his group were waiting for them off to the side. Noah reached for the inner tube as they went to join the boys. Let's do it again, Milo said, his expressive eyes sparkling. With just enough baby fat to be cute, he had dark hair and a fair complexion. The chill air brushed strokes of red across his nose and apple-polished cheeks. Two of his friends were lanky, the third more heavy-set. They were all dressed in name-brand sportswear and snow boots. I'm afraid we might be at this for a while, Noah said, giving Piper an apologetic look. I don't mind, she answered truthfully. She could do this all day if it meant riding with Noah. The boys took off to the ski lift. Piper was about to follow, but Noah caught her hand, turning her around to face him. She gave him a questioning look. I'm glad our paths connected, he said, cupping her chin, his gloved thumb moving softly back and forth across her skin. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she stepped closer, her face upturned as she gazed into his fascinating eyes, which had melded into warm gold in the sunlight. Her hand went to his forehead as she touched a strand of his hair. The temptation to know what he looked like beneath the beanie was too great. She lifted it off his head. His eyes widened in surprise as he chuckled. What are you doing? I want to see your hair, he winced. I have flat hair. Yes, you do. With his hair pressed flat, it accentuated the firm planes of his features, making him look even more masculine. He stepped back and vigorously rubbed his hand over his hair, lifting it. Well, how do I measure up? It's not too late to turn and run. There were boyish touches of humor around his eyes and mouth. The messiness of his hair only increased his attractiveness. A smile played over her lips. I think I'll stick around for a while. Good answer, he drawled. She squared her chin. You do need to be more forthcoming about your career and your background, though. As much as Piper wanted to live in the moment, the practical side of her argued that she needed to find out as much as she could about Noah Romeo before falling head over heels for him. He let out a pained sigh. Piper Kell, you're one demanding woman. And you're evasive, she countered. He motioned with his head. Shall we go find the boys? We'll talk as we walk. He caught hold of her hand and linked his fingers through hers. Piper was grateful for the warmth of their gloves, but she couldn't help but wish the gloves were off right now. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I dabble in lots of things. Stocks, real estate. He gave her a sidelong, wry grin. In some ways, I guess I'm still trying to find my true purpose. Know what I mean? I know exactly what you mean. She pushed out a self-deprecating laugh. I feel that way all the time. The more I try to chase my dream of becoming a professional photographer, the more elusive it becomes. Her stomach tightened, her longing for success welling inside her. That might not be a bad thing. They reached the ski lift and took their place in line. Piper followed Noah's trail of vision and spotted Milo and his friends, spread between two cars, moving up the side of the mountain. Piper turned to Noah, cocking her head. What do you mean? Sometimes the chase is more fulfilling than actually obtaining the goal. She considered his words, shaking her head back and forth. I'm not sure I believe that. He pursed his lips thoughtfully. Well, what if when you become a famous photographer, it's not all it's cracked up to be? She made a face. Photography makes me happy. It was more than happiness. Piper felt compelled to take pictures. It was her craft, her passion. Yes, because you're photographing what you love. Exactly, she shot back. He gave her a shrewd look. Take Nolan Vant, for example. Do you think he has the luxury of photographing what he wants? Or is he influenced by the commercial market, his agent, and 100 other constraints? You said yourself that you like his early work. Maybe he does too. She considered Noah's words. I haven't thought about it that way. A shadow crossed his face. You start out doing something you love, and then you monetize it, systemize it, repeat the same process day after day. Before long, you forget why you're even doing it. It was their turn to get on the lift. They stepped forward and sat down as Noah placed the inner tube on a rack attached to the back. The attendant lowered the safety bar as they started their ascent. Piper's stomach balled into a tight fist. Being suspended with her legs dangling, well, it was terrifying. Don't look down. Her knuckles clutching the safety bar, Piper angled to face Noah, picking back up on the conversation. She was grateful to have something else to focus on beside the empty air and how the ground was growing farther away the higher they climbed. What was it that you used to do? His eyes widened. What? A minute ago, when you were talking about forgetting why you're doing something, you sounded like you were talking about yourself. A dry smile touched his lips. My sister, actually. What does your sister do? She's a sculptor. Wow, that's impressive. What type of sculpting does she do? Modern art. She loves working with wood and metal. She's very talented. Before she had kids, she was die-hard about it. Now she does it as more of a hobby. That's awesome. Is her work in any of the galleries in Park City? I believe so. He flashed a large grin. You should ask her. A corner of her lip tipped in puzzlement. Huh? After we've finished tubing, I'm taking Milo and his friends to Zoe's house. His eyes lit with hope. Will you go with me? I promised Zoe I'd go caroling with her and the kids tonight. Caroling? She laughed. Do people even do that anymore? We do, he said confidently. I'm a horrible singer, she lamented. He pursed his lips, assessing her. What? She asked, feeling a little self-conscious. I bet you're a better singer than you're letting on. No, I'm not, she said honestly. Piper liked to sing in the shower, but not in front of people. He looked thoughtful. Well, how are you at decorating cookies? A smile ruffled her lips. Decent. All right, you can decorate the cookies, and I'll sing. She didn't understand where this was going. What does decorating cookies have to do with caroling? Zoe's baking cookies for us to take to the people we visit when caroling. Wow, that's nice of her. Noah and his sister were impressive. It made Piper feel guilty for being so consumed with her photography. She and Corey didn't know their neighbors. Piper hadn't even sent Christmas cards out this year. She'd bought a few gifts for her parents and brother, which she would bring to her parents' house on Christmas Day, but that was about it. He nodded. Zoe's great at giving back to the community and her family. Her husband and boys are her life. A pang went through Piper. She wanted to find someone to have a family with, but she assumed it would be down the road after she became successful. Piper's mother was always urging Piper to take her zeal for her photography down a notch and broaden her interests. It was commendable that Zoe had put her art on the back burner to focus on her husband and children. Piper wanted to meet Zoe so she could see how she balanced her life. More than that, Piper wanted to spend as much time with Noah as she could. What do you say? Will you come? Sure, I'd love to. Piper had told Scotty she'd be gone for the rest of the day. Scotty was perfectly fine with it. Evidently, things had gone super well when he stopped by the chocolate shop and talked to Corey. The two of them were going on a date this evening. Scotty was so ecstatic about the date that Piper probably could have told him she was taking the rest of the week off, and he would have been great with it, even if it meant that he'd have to pull double duty. Piper wouldn't do that to him, of course. She was only taking today. Piper felt a little guilty for skipping work, especially since she was doing it without Deidre's knowledge. Piper prided herself on being a responsible employee. She'd never done anything like this before. She was moving into uncharted territory with Noah Romeo. The ski lift jerked. Clutching the bar, Piper looked up as it changed tracks. Noah dipped his head, his eyes holding amusement. "You're afraid of heights." "A little," she admitted with an uneasy laugh. "Is this your first time on a ski lift?" "Yep." She glanced down at the ground and the evergreen trees, which looked tiny. Bad idea. She gritted her teeth as a wave of panic rolled over her. His voice went up a pitch. "How long have you lived in Park City?" "A couple years." "And you've never been on a ski lift?" He shook his head. "Wow." She felt a burst of heat despite the cold. Now that she'd revealed that tidbit of information, he would know how much she wanted to be with him, enough to brave one of her biggest fears. "You're something," he said with a note of appreciation. She looked at him, taken aback by the tenderness in his eyes. "Thank you," he added softly. A smile trembled over her lips. For what? For being such a scaredy cat? She was so frustrated with her weakness right now. People rode ski lifts all the time and were perfectly fine. Piper just had to keep reminding herself of that. "For being you, it means a lot that you would do this with me." The distance between them shrank as they shared a smile. "You're welcome," she responded genuinely. Noah scooted close and slid his arm around her shoulders. "Relax," he urged. "I've got you." Her muscles gave up their tension as she settled into the curve of his shoulder. Noah couldn't know how thrilling those 3 words were. Yes, he did have her. In a short 2-hour span of time, Noah Romeo had indeed swept her off her feet. She was doing things she'd never done before. And Piper had the distinct feeling that this was only the beginning. Chapter 4. Piper blinked, clenching her fist. "This is where your sister lives?" "Yep," Noah answered like it was no big deal. It was a big deal. The enormous luxury home sat at the top of a ridge, affording a bird's-eye view of the exclusive neighborhood below. The home had a modern, rustic feel with the rock siding and large timbers that framed the roofline. As impressive as the front of the house was, with its massive wooden door and scores of windows, Piper could only imagine how amazing the back of the home was. No wonder Zoe wasn't concerned about her art. She was wealthy. Piper could tell from the clothes Milo wore that he came from money. Also, the SUV they were in must have cost a fortune. Noah explained that it belonged to Zoe and that he was driving it so that all of the boys would fit. Piper had grown up in a middle-class home. Her mom was a high school math teacher and her dad was a sales manager at a car dealership. They'd always had what they needed, but there wasn't a lot of surplus. Now that Piper was on her own, she had to budget carefully so that she'd have enough to not only pay her rent, but to fund her photography. Her equipment wasn't cheap, nor was it cheap to have her work made into prints. She'd been working for several months to get enough prints to show at the reception that Deidre would hopefully have for her after the first of the year. The boys opened the doors and darted inside. Noah turned to her. "You ready?" "Yep," she said, forcing a smile. Piper could tell from Noah's expression that he'd picked up on her reservations. It was uncanny how intuitive he was. He caught hold of her hand and squeezed it. "Don't worry. You'll get along great with Zoe." Why was Piper so nervous? She and Noah had only just met. It wasn't like the two of them were an item and that he was bringing her home to meet his parents. There should be zero expectations. She should be calm as a cucumber rather than a bundle of nerves. Oh well, feelings weren't rational. There was no sense in going rounds with herself. Piper was nervous and intimidated by the grand home. Noah said he dabbled in lots of things for his career, which was code for one who had wealth. Was he a self-made man, or had he inherited the wealth? After looking at Zoe's home, Piper thought it might be the latter. Then again, Piper didn't know what Zoe's husband did for a living. Maybe the wealth had come from him. Piper didn't even know why she was so concerned about the house or SUV. It wasn't like she sought after wealth. Her desire to be successful in her photography went beyond a mere desire for money. She wanted her work to be appreciated. Still, one couldn't easily separate the money from the success. One equated the other. Piper needed money to live, and if she were compensated for her photography, then she could spend more time on taking photos rather than having a full-time job and taking photos in her spare time. As they went up the walk, Noah placed his hand on the small of her back. His touch was easy, protective. Having him by her side gave Piper a boost of confidence. When they stepped inside, the fragrant scent of baking cookies caused Piper's stomach to rumble. She glanced around the spacious foyer that opened to the family room with the open ceiling and exposed beams. Piper took in the wall of windows and double doors that led to the back deck. The view was impressive in the afternoon, but Piper imagined it was awe-inspiring in the evening. The decor was tasteful and homey, not over-the-top fancy. Piper's gaze swept over the enormous Christmas tree with the white lights and red and gold ornaments. Brightly wrapped packages were stacked neatly beneath the tree. Fresh garland and red berries topped the mantel, and there were various size and style stockings hanging on hooks. Piper's eye caught on the large bronze sculpture on the other side of the room. The base was fashioned out of driftwood, and the bronze was sculpted into what looked to be twisting flames. "That's incredible," Piper murmured. "Yep, Zoe's good." Noah grinned with a touch of pride as he removed his gloves. "Can I take your coat and purse?" "Thank you." Removing her gloves and placing them in her purse, Piper unzipped her coat as Noah did the same. He removed his beanie and ruffled his hair. He was so darn cute that she couldn't help but smile. "What?" "I like your hair." He grimaced. "It's a mess right now." "I know," she answered matter-of-factly. "I like it messy." He pointed. "I love your curls." The compliment sent a dart of warmth through her. "Thanks." Piper had a love-hate relationship with her hair. Her curls had a mind of their own. She could fix her hair exactly the same way and it would turn out looking different. Today, it had done well, thankfully. He opened a door beside the large entrance door, revealing a coat closet. He placed his coat on a hanger before reaching for her purse and coat. She tucked her hair behind her ears before pushing her hands into her pockets. She looked down. "Would you like for me to remove my shoes?" "Nah, Zoe won't mind if you leave them on," he said with a wave of his hand. Piper looked at the wide-planked hickory floors that had a natural sheen. "I hate to track." There were salt smudges on the foyer floor, presumably from the boys. "Okay, we'll both take our shoes off," Noah suggested. Piper was grateful that she'd worn socks without holes today. They were pink with yellow stars. Not a great match for her red sweater, but Noah didn't seem to be paying any attention to her socks. She looked around. Where did the boys get off to? Probably in the kitchen, helping themselves to cookies. Come on. He motioned with his head. A jolt ran through her when he touched her back, leading her down a hall and into the kitchen. As they stepped into the room, a thin, well-dressed brunette looked up from her work at icing a cookie. A large smile filled her face. "Hello." "Hello," Piper repeated with a hesitant smile. Noah did the introductions. "This is Zoe, my sister. Zoe, this is Piper." Zoe put down the icing bag, wiped her hands on a nearby dish towel, and came up to them. "Nice to meet you, Piper." Zoe stretched out her hand as the two shook. Zoe's dark eyes glittered with teasing as she looked at Noah. "The boys told me you met a new friend today." Her voice hung in innuendo at the word friend, causing heat to rush into Piper's cheeks. Zoe's southern accent was stronger than Noah's. It was cultured, graceful, a voice Piper could listen to all day. She could definitely see the resemblance between the two siblings. Maybe it was the shape of their eyes, although Zoe's were dark, whereas Noah's were the fascinating hazel gold. Zoe was beautiful with her high cheekbones and long, glossy, straight hair. "Piper stepped into the middle of our snowball fight," Milo interjected. He and his friends were gathered around the island, chowing down on sugar cookies. "Oh, no," Zoe said, laughter simmering in her eyes. "That's terrible." "It was terrible," Piper said, throwing Noah a disgruntled look. "I got beamed in the face." She bit back, the smile twitching at her lips. Easy laughter floated from Noah's throat as he moved close to Piper, draping an arm around her shoulders. "Don't let Piper's angelic face fool you. She can hold her own." Piper caught the flash of surprise across Zoe's features. She was probably wondering why Noah was acting so familiar with a girl he'd just met. It made Piper feel a little uncomfortable. Things were happening fast. Still, she couldn't deny that every inch of her body was zinging with attraction at Noah's nearness. Another thought entered Piper's mind, causing her insides to stiffen. Had Noah brought other girls here? She'd not even stopped to think about his past relationships. A man like Noah would have girls flocking to him. It was miraculous that he was unattached and that the two of them had met like they had. Maybe fate was giving Piper an early Christmas present. Zoe sighed in relief. "I'm glad you're here. I can use some help. I've got cookies coming out my ears," she mumbled as she looked at the clock on the microwave. "And we're running out of time." "You'll be happy to know that Piper is great at decorating cookies," Noah said. Zoe brightened. "Fabulous." Great might be stretching it, but I'll be glad to help," Piper said. "I'm sure anything you do will be an improvement over what this guy does," Zoe chuckled, cutting her eyes at Noah. "3/4 of everything he decorates ends up in his mouth. Men," she muttered with a long sigh as she gave Piper a conspiratorial look. Piper decided right then and there that she liked Zoe. A feeling of déjà vu swept over her, and she got the feeling the two of them would become good friends. It was both a perplexing and neat feeling. "Hey," Noah protested. But Piper could tell that he didn't mind the razzing. Piper sensed that Noah and Zoe were close. Zoe went back to the island. "All right, boys, that's enough. We want to make sure we have some cookies to take Carolyn." She made a shooing motion with her hands. "Go on, get out of the kitchen. Can we go to Chris's house and play video games?" Milo asked with large puppy dog eyes. Zoe pursed her lips as she dipped her head. Her voice took on a scolding tone. "You know I don't like you playing too many video games." Milo brought his hands together in a pleading pose. "Please." "Okay," Zoe relented. "But nothing violent," she added firmly, wagging a finger. "We won't," the boys chirped, giving her cherubic smiles. "Milo, be sure and come home by 6. We're leaving to go Carolyn at 6:30. "Yes, ma'am," Milo answered. A devilish grin stole over his lips as he snatched another cookie, then darted out of Zoe's reach as she attempted to swat him in the head. Piper could see the longing on the other boys' faces and could tell they wanted more cookies. However, they were too chicken to grab one. Zoe laughed. "Go on, get out of here." "Thanks for the cookies, Mrs. Stevens," one of the boys said. Milo looked at Noah. "Thanks for taking us tubing." He pumped his eyebrows. "You're my favorite uncle." "I see how it is," Noah drawled. "Love the one you're with." "Yep." Milo grinned as he and his friends rushed out with nimble steps. Zoe motioned at a bar stool. "Have a seat. Do y'all need aprons?" "Sure," Piper said. Zoe pulled out a drawer and grabbed 2 aprons, handing one to each of them. "Thank you." Piper put the strap over her head and tied the strings around her waist. After getting his apron on, Noah looked around. "Where's Madison?" He turned to Piper. "Madison's my 6-year-old niece." "She had a play date with one of her friends from school." Zoe glanced at the clock. "She should be coming home soon." "Do you need to go and pick her up?" Noah asked. Anticipation rippled through Piper at the thought of being here alone with Noah. "No, her friend's mom is going to drop her off." Disappointment wafted through Piper. She chuckled inwardly at how she was crushing on Noah. It was wonderful being here with Noah, even with his sister present. "Jump on in," Zoe encouraged. Piper pulled over a cookie shaped like a star, figuring it would be an easy place to start. Noah reached for a Christmas tree cookie and a bowl of dark green icing. "Is Carl getting back in time to go caroling with us tonight?" Noah asked. "Carl is Zoe's husband," he explained. "He had to go to an emergency meeting in Orlando to meet with a client. Carl is a real estate consultant. He teaches and trains agents how to be more effective sellers." "No, he's having to stay an extra couple of days and won't be coming home till Thursday evening." Zoe's features pulled tight and Piper could feel her sadness. Noah picked up on it too. "I'm sorry, sis. That's a bummer." Zoe's lips formed a grim line as she nodded. "Yeah, it is," she sighed. "That's how it goes sometimes, right?" Her voice sounded weak, and Piper could tell she was trying to put on a brave face. Zoe gave Noah a grateful smile. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too," Noah agreed. Zoe reached for the bag of icing and resumed decorating the cookie that she'd been working on when Noah and Piper came into the kitchen. Her eyes flickered to Piper. "Tell me about yourself," she began. "Are you from Park City?" "No, I'm from Sandy." "Where's that?" Noah asked. "Just outside of Salt Lake City," Piper answered. "About 50 minutes from here," Zoe added. "Are you spending Christmas in Park City?" Piper could feel Noah's keen interest. "No, I'm going to Sandy to be with my parents and older brother." Piper's attention was pulled to Noah's cookie. He was slathering on green icing in a messy, haphazard fashion, whereas Zoe's cookie looked like it had come out of a bakery. Piper's cookie was somewhere in between. She worked with the butter knife to make the yellow frosting smooth. "Do you only have the one sibling?" Noah asked. "Yes." Piper thought back to her and Noah's earlier conversation. "You mentioned your one brother, the player." She couldn't remember his name. "Is it just the 3 of you?" A look of amusement passed between Zoe and Noah. "What?" Piper asked dubiously. "There are 6 of us in all," Zoe answered. Piper's jaw dropped as she looked at Noah and Zoe. "You have 4 other siblings?" "Yep." Noah reached for the container of sprinkles and began liberally shaking them onto his cookie. Piper rolled the information around in her head a few times. "How many girls and boys?" "1 girl and 5 boys," Zoe answered with a grin. "You're the only girl. I'll bet that was tough with all those boys," Noah hooted. "Trust me, Zoe can hold her own. She's meaner and tougher than all the brothers put together." Zoe stuck her tongue out at him. The oven dinged as Zoe moved to retrieve a batch of cookies. Where do the two of you fall in the line? Piper could tell that Zoe was older, but she wasn't sure how much. I'm the oldest, Zoe answered, and there are 2 in between me and Noah. She placed the cookies on the counter before removing the oven mitt and picking up the icing bag. Piper couldn't imagine what it must be like to come from such a large family. Are they coming here for Christmas? No, not this year, Noah said. From the way he and Zoe looked at one another, Piper could tell there was more to the story than they were telling. Interest simmered inside her. She wanted to know every last detail about Noah Romeo and his family. They're spending Christmas in Nashville, Noah finished. Done with the cookies she was working on, Zoe drew back to admire her work before pushing it aside and grabbing another. My husband Carl's schedule has been so erratic that I wasn't sure how much time he'd have off for Christmas. We decided to stay here. The fine lines around her mouth tightened. Of course, I had no idea Carl would get called away to Orlando. Her voice was strained, melancholy. Well, it's a good thing I'm here, Noah said, his voice taking a deliberate upward lilt like he was trying to cheer up his sister. Zoe's features lifted. Yes, and we're going caroling tonight. Did you practice the songs on your guitar? Noah nodded. He threw a wink at Piper that said, Watch this. Yep, the 12 days of Christmas and Grandma got run over by a reindeer, right? Zoe chuckled. Right, she said dryly, rolling her eyes. Silent Night and the first Noel. I know, he drawled. I've got it and I'm ready. He tossed Piper a playful look. Piper's gonna sing a solo for us. Piper nearly choked on her own saliva as she coughed. I don't think so, she squeaked as she gave Noah a light shove. He just laughed. A comfortable silence settled between them before Piper spoke. Your sculpture in the family room is incredible. Thanks, Zoe said with an appreciative smile. Your use of fluidity and movement is impressive. Zoe looked surprised. Are you an artist? No, a photographer. A smile swelled over Zoe's face. Really? That's interesting. Noah cut in. Maybe you can help us out, sis. Piper and I were discussing Nolan Vant and his work. Piper works at the Landon Gallery. They carry Vant's photographs. Zoe nodded impatiently, like Noah was telling her something she already knew. Noah's lips pulled into a grin as he looked at Piper. Piper here thinks that Vant has lost his edge. Go on. Tell Zoe what you told me. Piper's eyes narrowed with the sneaky suspicion of being set up. I don't mean to be offensive. She looked at Zoe. Is Nolan Vant a friend of yours? The art world was small. Yep, Nolan and I go way back. Just as she feared. Heat burned Piper's face as she turned to Noah. You should have told me that before I made a complete idiot of myself. Irritation stirred inside her. Noah seemed to get great delight out of needling her. It might seem funny to him, but Piper didn't want to insult Zoe by dissing on her friend. Piper's head swung back and forth. I should have kept my big mouth shut. Zoe waved the comment away with an airy laugh. I take zero offense at any opinions you might have. Nolan's a big boy. He can handle the criticism. If he were here, I'm sure he'd tell you the same thing, Noah added. Yes, I'm sure he would, Zoe agreed. She looked at Piper, her eyes gleaming. So what's your opinion? Piper scrunched her nose as she compiled her thoughts. Absently, she pushed her completed cookie aside and reached for another. This one was a Christmas wreath. As I told Noah, everyone goes gaga over Vant's work. It's fine if watered-down commercialism's your thing. Amusement swirled in Zoe's eyes. Man, she's tough. I know, Noah said with a touch of admiration. Their reactions were encouraging, prompting Piper to continue. Nolan Vant's earlier works were incredible. Now it's like he's just replicating the same thing over and over. He's lost his edge. It happens to all of us, Zoe said morosely. If your other sculptures are any indication of your work, then that certainly hasn't happened to you, Piper said. Zoe blinked a few times. Thanks. She took in a deep breath. It's been so long since I've done anything. She swept an encompassing hand across the cookies, except for stuff like this, helping kiddos with homework and making dinner. I applaud you for putting your family first, Piper said. I'm sure it's hard to strike the right balance between family life and your work. You seem to be doing so beautifully. Confusion tumbled inside Piper when Zoe's eyes misted. She looked at Noah. He shook his head, placing a reassuring hand on Piper's arm that said he would explain later. A few tense beats passed. Noah cleared his throat. I keep telling Zoe that she should open her own gallery. As tight as she and Vant are, Zoe could persuade him to sign an exclusive with her gallery. Piper didn't want to bring up the point of Deidre snagging Vant into a marriage that would assure her of the exclusive rights to his work in Park City. If you could swing that, you'd be set. Vant's prints make up 80% of our sales, and his exclusive with the Landon Gallery ends next month. As soon as the words left Piper's mouth, she realized that she was divulging too much. She pulled at the neck of her sweater, wishing she were a turtle so she could draw her head into a protective shell. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. It was poor form to speak of confidential terms that pertained to the gallery. Sure, Deidre was a snake, but that didn't excuse Piper from speaking out of turn. Zoe waved a hand. It's okay. Vant has already told me about his exclusive ending. Oh, good, Piper uttered, drawing in a relieved breath. I should have considered opening my own gallery, Zoe shuddered. But I don't want to be a shopkeeper. It's a busy job, Piper said. What did you like about Vant's earlier work? Noah asked. Piper thought for a moment. Approaching Storm is my all-time favorite. Her voice gathered intensity. There's something so raw and vulnerable about the dilapidated shack cowering beneath the imposing storm front. That juxtaposed against the battered rag doll on the front porch, and the hot pink lace slip hanging on the clothesline and flapping in the wind was brilliant. A nature versus man sort of theme. That's one of my favorites too, Zoe said. Also, I like the long train with the endless line of dull, rusted train cars snaked along the track, broken up by a few brightly colored cars spotted here and there. It reminds me of the monotony of life, broken up by memorable moments. Noah's eyes held hers. Kind of like our perfect day. She soaked in his handsome features, marveling at the intensity of her feelings. Yes, she said softly. Time paused as Piper traced the outline of his lips. Her pulse thrashed out a fast beat against her ears. Her body seemed to have a mind of its own as she leaned closer to him, holding her breath. Zoe cleared her throat, breaking the spell. Piper drew back, embarrassed. She'd lost herself for a moment. In front of Noah's sister. Sheesh. She was a hopeless romantic. Tell us about your photographs, Zoe prompted. Piper moistened her lips. I love street photography. Zoe smiled. Ah, the raw and gritty. Yep, I enjoy finding beauty in the seemingly ordinary. Piper chuckled. I shouldn't be bagging on Nolan Vant. At least he's made it. I'm still trying to get a foothold into the industry. Sometimes you have to keep doing the right thing long enough, Noah said sagely. I guess that's true, Piper shrugged, offering a rueful grin. The trick is to keep from going broke in the meantime. Hello, a young girl sang as she bounded into the kitchen and flung her arms around Zoe's waist. Hey, Madison, Zoe said affectionately, returning the hug. How did it go at Courtney's house? Great, Madison responded exuberantly as she pulled away from her mom, eyeing the cookies. Can I have one? Yep, sure can, but just one. We want to make sure we have enough to give away tonight. Madison reached for a cookie and took a large bite. She was a cutie with her long hair pulled up in high pigtails and flanked with red ribbons. Her large dark eyes were the same color as Zoe's. She had fair skin like Milo, with freckles sprinkled across her nose. Zoe and Noah were olive-toned, making Piper suspect that Zoe's husband, Carl, had a fair complexion. "Hey, Maddie," Noah said. "Hey, Uncle Noah," she sang, eyeing Piper with curiosity. Piper smiled. "Hello, I'm Piper." "Hello," Madison responded. A shy smile curved her lips. "Are you Noah's girlfriend?" Piper's eyes popped open wide as she looked at Noah, unsure how to respond. "I'm working on that," Noah said with a grin. "Looks like you're off to a great start," Zoe piped in, her eyes twinkling as she looked at both of them. "Here's to great beginnings," Noah said as he scooted his bar stool closer to Piper and slipped his arm around her shoulders. Zoe brought her hands together, her voice going pragmatic. "Okay, we've got to get these cookies done. Then we'll order pizza for dinner." "Pizza, yay!" Madison chimed as she danced around in a circle. The adults laughed as they got back to work. Chapter 5. The joyful notes of the last line of the first Noel settled around Piper like a warm blanket as her eyes misted. Caroling with Noah, Zoe, Milo, and Madison was one of the neatest things Piper had ever done. Noah was great on the guitar with a beautiful tenor voice. Zoe also had a fantastic voice. Piper felt like a croaking frog in comparison, so she just sang quietly. No one made her feel bad about it, however. As they walked from house to house in the picturesque neighborhood that resembled a Hallmark card, singing and delivering canisters of cookies, Piper's heart grew lighter and lighter with each step. This is what Christmas was all about, the spirit of giving and family. Piper once again recalled her mother's warning about being too consumed with her career. It hit her square between the eyes every time she saw the glistening eyes of the people standing in the doorways and the quiet glow on their faces as they listened to the music and received the cookies. Noah played the intro for Silent Night on the guitar as everyone began singing. The elderly man and woman standing in the doorway sang along. Piper and Noah's eyes met as he smiled, melting her heart. Even as she felt the exultation of the moment, a twinge ran through her. After Christmas, Noah would go back to Boulder City. She didn't want that. She wanted him to stay here with her. Her insides laughed her to scorn. They'd known each other for less than a day. Piper needed to reel herself in here. It had been a magical day, but one day was not enough to build a relationship on. She just had to keep moving forward and see what happened from here. After caroling, they all went back to Zoe's house where they drank hot chocolate and sat by the crackling fire. The kids were on break and were ecstatic to stay up longer. Piper enjoyed the witty banter that passed back and forth between Noah and Zoe. She wondered what the rest of the siblings were like. Were they all as close as Noah and Zoe? Piper and her brother Stuart fought like cats and dogs as teenagers. Now that they were grown, they got along okay, but didn't hang out together. A computer geek, Stuart could drone on for hours about the code he was writing, but all of it was lost on Piper. Even though she and Stuart had little in common, watching the interaction between Noah and Zoe prompted Piper to want to develop a better relationship with Stuart and her parents. She needed to take time out of her hectic schedule to visit them more often. A little after 10 p.m., Zoe started yawning. "I'm sorry. It's been a long day." She looked at Milo and Madison. "Time to get ready for bed." They groaned simultaneously. Noah removed his arm from around Piper's shoulders as they stood. "Thank you so much," Piper said with a rush of emotion. "It was wonderful meeting you and your family." "You're welcome here any time," Zoe said genuinely as the two of them hugged. Piper said goodbye to the kids as she and Noah walked to the SUV hand in hand. When they reached it, Noah opened her door and helped her into the seat before going around to the driver's side. Piper's skin prickled with the delicious knowledge that they were finally alone. He started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. "I had a wonderful time tonight," she began. "Me too." He reached for her hand, sending an electric spark through her as he laced his fingers through hers. "That snowball fight was a dang good idea." "Yes, it was," she said with a laugh. "Zoe's amazing." "She is," he agreed. Piper's jaw worked, wondering if she dared ask the question that was on her mind. Is everything okay with Zoe and her husband? When Noah didn't speak, she rushed on. "Sorry, it's none of my business." He squeezed her hand. "It's okay. I don't mind telling you about it." He paused. "Things have been strained between Zoe and Carl. They're seeing a counselor, trying to work through the rough spots. Carl's a good guy. I believe they'll work it out." "I hope so," Piper said fervently. "As you can tell, Zoe's crazy about him. She's such a good mom and an incredibly talented sculptor." "Well, you made a great impression on Zoe." "I did?" That was music to Piper's ears. She angled to look at Noah, her eyes tracing the lines of his firm jaw. She caught the crooked grin on his lips when the lights from a passing car streaked through the SUV. "Yep, when you went to the restroom, she told me that if I had any sense in my pea-brain head that I'd hang on to you." A ribbon of pleasure twirled through Piper as she smiled. That was nice of her. "What did you say?" She held her breath, waiting for him to answer. "Oh, I wholeheartedly agreed." The breath whooshed out of her lungs. "This is happening fast." "Yes. Is fast a bad thing?" She considered his question, chewing on her lower lip. "No, not necessarily." She hesitated. "I just don't like thinking about what will happen when Christmas is over and you go back to Boulder City. Maybe I'll stick around a little longer." Her heart leapt. "Really?" "Really." Piper was glad it was dark because she couldn't hide the ginormous smile forming over her lips. They'd been driving for 5 minutes or more when Noah cast her a sidelong glance. "I don't even know where you live. I'm just driving back toward Main Street." She laughed. "Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. You're going the right direction. My house is just a few blocks from Main Street in the historic district." She proceeded to give him directions. When they pulled in front of the small house she and Corey rented, Piper's pulse shot through the roof, knowing that the goodbye kiss was imminent. Noah glanced toward the house. "Would you like for me to walk you to the door?" Normally I'd say yes, but my roommate Corey's home. Piper could tell because all the lights were on. He shifted to face her. "I guess we'll have to say goodnight here." "Yes." Her heart was hammering so furiously that she was dizzy. His eyes searched hers. "When can I see you again?" Her heart raced with eagerness, the words flying out of her mouth. "Tomorrow evening, after I get off work?" A dazzling smile spread over his lips. "That sounds great." He leaned closer and cupped her cheek, causing her breath to hitch. "Today has been perfect." Her lips parted. "Yes," she whispered as his lips came down coaxingly on hers. She drank in the exquisite warmth of his lips, which tasted faintly of hot chocolate. His arms went around her waist, trailing sensuously up the length of her back. Adrenaline shot through her as he deepened the kiss, his demanding lips burning a river of fire through her veins. Her spirit joined his in spirals of ecstasy that caressed her soul. She could have kissed him forever, were it not for the need to breathe. She had the sensation of moving through time and space. Wait a minute. They were moving. The car was rolling forward. With a start, he jerked back. "Crap," he said as he pulled up the emergency brake to bring them to an abrupt stop. The nose of the SUV was only a few inches shy of hitting the bumper of the neighbor's car parked in front of them. Quickly, he put the transmission back into park. The shocked look on Noah's handsome face mirrored Piper's own feelings. In their effort to get closer to one another, they'd knocked the SUV out of park. Laughter gurgled in Piper's throat, escaping as a snigger. A second later, they both burst out laughing. Noah shook his head. Well, that was a first. A grin curved her lips as she touched his jaw. Today's the first of many things. I've never played hooky from work before. He grinned. You'd never ridden a ski lift, or gone tubing. Or caroling. A smile pulled at her lips. I've never kissed a guy I just met. And I certainly haven't been so quick to fall head over heels, her mind added. She was normally so disciplined, so practical. He frowned. I thought I kissed you. You did, she chuckled. And then I kissed you back. His voice took on a husky edge as his eyes went to her lips. You're good at that. Tingles danced down her spine. She was craving another kiss, badly. Here's to new beginnin's, he murmured, his mouth taking hers once more. This time, however, they were careful not to knock the shifter. They exchanged numbers, promising to meet up at a quaint Italian restaurant just off Main Street the following evening. By the time Piper got out of the SUV, she was practically floating. When she got to her front door, she opened it. Before stepping inside, she turned back and waved as Noah drove off. Her heart was flying so high that there was no chance of her coming back down to earth anytime soon. She caught a glimpse of Corey out of the corner of her eye. You'll never guess what happened to me, she exclaimed. She stopped short when her vision focused, and she realized that Corey was on the couch, locking lips with Scotty. Surprised laughter bubbled in her throat as her hand went to her mouth. Oops! Corey and Scotty pulled away from each other. Corey's face turned as red as her hair, but Scotty looked rather pleased. I take it the date went well, Piper chimed. Corey touched her hair to smooth it back into place. Yep, she snipped. Scotty draped an arm around Corey. How did your evening go, love? Piper tried to hide her whale-sized smile, but she couldn't. It stretched from ear to ear. Fabulous. She looked at Corey. I met someone. That's what Scotty said. A look of consternation crossed Corey's beautiful face. And you skipped work to go on a date with him? She shook her head. Who are you, and what have you done with my best friend? Piper held out her hands, modeling from side to side. It's the new me. Of course, I couldn't have done it had Scotty not covered for me. She looked at him. Thank you, by the way. How did it go? Great. I sold 3 paintings and a print. Wow, that's great. Piper and Scotty were paid hourly wages plus commissions. Piper was grateful that Scotty had been able to benefit from his good deed. Any word from Deidre? Not a peep. It's nice having Nolan Vant in town to keep her occupied. Yes, it is, Scotty agreed. A stilted silence washed over them, and it didn't take long for Piper to get the hint. 2 was company, and 3 a crowd. I'll just leave you 2 alone. She raised her eyebrows, shooting them a wicked grin. To do whatever it was you were doing. It was fun to watch Corey's face go red again. Sounds good, love, Scotty said, turning his attention back to Corey. Piper frowned. I'm not sure how I feel about my 2 closest friends dating each other. Get used to it, Scotty said, giving Corey a lingering look. Corey responded with a doting smile. Piper sighed. Truthfully, she was glad Corey and Scotty were together. She'd always thought they would make a great couple. All right, good night, Piper said breezily, traipsing past them to her bedroom. She needed to get some rest to be fresh tomorrow, but Piper didn't know how she was going to come back to Earth and actually make herself get some sleep. When she did finally drift off to a slumber, she knew her dreams would be wrapped in the gold-green hue of Noah's magnetic eyes, and that her lips would hold the memory of his achingly tender and tantalizing kisses. A flush rose over her cheeks. She touched her skin, feeling the burn. Yep, she had it bad for Noah Romeo. An unbidden whisper rose in her breast. Please, don't break my heart. She shuddered, wondering where that thought had come from as she scuttled off to bed. Chapter 6. Scotty was perched on the edge of Piper's desk. He cast a furtive glance over his shoulder before leaning in and lowering his voice. You won't believe what I heard. What? Piper asked, matching his quiet tone. Deidre was on the phone with one of her girlfriends. Evidently, Nolan Vance stood her up yesterday. She was all broken up about it, nearly in tears. Piper's head swung back and forth. That's crazy. A blip of satisfaction streaked over Scotty's face. Maybe Vance not such a wazzock after all. The chap's probably getting out while he still can. Piper felt a ping of sympathy for Deidre. Sure, she was a pain in the neck. But Piper didn't wish Deidre any ill will. If anything, Piper wanted to have a good working relationship with Deidre that would be mutually beneficial. Scotty chuckled. Deidre's not giving up, though. She told her friend she'd fight for him till the bitter end. He shrugged. Whatever that means. Piper made a face. Well, let's hope for Nolan Vance's sake that it doesn't get too sticky. Deidre's not one to give up the hunt when she has the target in her sights. Scotty let out a low whistle. No, she's not. Piper thought of something else. Is everything still a go with the reception? Oh, yeah. Deidre has already given me my marching orders. I'm to move all of Vance's photographs to the front. You already did that. He held up a finger. Deidre asked me to move most of them up front. Now she wants all of them. Sounds like she's pulling out all the stops. He sighed as he stood. I guess I'd better get moving. Good luck. I'll need it, he muttered. Before he could walk away, Piper wiggled her eyebrows. How's it going with Corey? A large smile spread over his lips. Splendid. I gathered that last night when you were giving her a tonsil inspection, she laughed. He turned pink. How about you? Her heart did a little dance. Splendid, she gushed, mimicking Scotty's British accent. His eyes softened. I'm glad, love. You deserve to have some happiness. Thank you. Piper could hardly wait for this evening. The bell over the front door jingled. Looks like you're up, Scotty said as he strolled to the back. Piper rose to her feet as she went to help the two women who'd just stepped in. Hello, she said cheerily. Is there anything I can help you with? The older of the two spoke. Yes, we're looking for a print to go over my daughter's mantle. The younger one smiled. Piper pieced together that she was the daughter. I understand that you carry Nolan Vance's work. Piper brought her hands together. Yes, we do. Are you looking for anything of his in particular? We'd just like to see everything you have. Fantastic, Piper motioned. All of these photographs in the front are Nolan's. We have a few more that we're bringing up from other areas of the gallery. The older woman smiled courteously. Thank you. We'll start up here. If you need anything, please let me know, Piper offered, not wanting to hover. Actually, the younger woman said, it would be great if you could tell us a little about each piece. Of course. Let's start over here with his Summer Sunrise collection. An hour and a half later, the women were still undecided. Piper had learned the art of patience when it came to dealing with customers. Still, she was ready for the women to make a decision. A practiced smile stretched over her lips. What do you think? Her feet were starting to ache from standing so long in her heels. The women looked at each other. Well? Claire, the mother, asked. Julie exhaled a heavy breath. My favorites are Serene Forest and Jagged Peaks. But, Claire prompted, but they feel so static, so ordinary. Piper bit back a smile. She couldn't have said it any better herself. I thought you wanted a Nolan Vant piece, Claire countered, the corners of her lips drooping. Julie shrugged. I thought so, but now I'm not sure. She squared her jaw, her voice rising in volume as she spoke faster. I want something with more movement, something that grabs me. She stopped, giving Piper a sheepish smile. Sorry, that probably sounds crazy. No, not at all. I get you perfectly, Piper said, the fire in her belly stoking. It was refreshing to meet someone like Julie. The art world needed more free thinkers rather than sheep who purchased pieces simply because they were told over and over that the pieces were great. Do you have something that you could recommend? Julie asked tentatively. It was always interesting to pick up on the dynamics of the relationships of those who came into the gallery. Piper could tell that Julie was stymied by her mother's domineering manner. She looked at the women's faces. Julie was hopeful, Claire annoyed. Piper's pulse bumped up several notches. Did she dare show her own work? She swallowed. You know what? I might have something. Her heart was turning somersaults in her chest as she led the women back to the rack. Her budding relationship with Noah was prompting her to take more risks. What harm could it do for her to show the women her prints? If they didn't like them, then she'd just show them something else. Of course, they would want to know about the photographer, and then she'd have to tell them it was her. Hot prickles covered her. Yikes. She hadn't thought that far ahead. She had to think positive and believe in herself. Her heart was pumping so furiously that Piper felt like she might faint from dizziness as she went to the rack and opened it to her work. It took a superhuman effort to keep her voice neutral as she spoke. What do you think about these two? Julie's eyes lit up. These are great. Yes, just what I'm looking for. Really? Piper squeaked, her heart shouting out a hurrah. Julie stepped up to examine one that was of a homeless man, giving a young boy a toothless grin. The boy and his mother had been walking by the man. The woman was well-dressed and in a hurry. She had a firm grasp on the boy's hand, her eyes fixed straight ahead, not wanting to interact with the homeless man. The boy, however, was lagging behind, looking on curiously at the man. Piper had meant for the photograph to speak of the innocence of children and how accepting they are. But after taking it, she realized that there was something so guileless and sincere in the homeless man's expression that one had the impression of him also being a child, as if he were seeing himself when he was young, with an endless world of opportunities spread before him. Claire balked. Surely you can't be considering actually hanging a picture of a homeless man in your living room. Julie's eyes shifted back and forth. I guess that would be a bit much, but I could hang it in my study. Claire's Botoxed face shriveled in disapproval as she turned to Piper. Who's the photographer? Piper clasped her hands together, a shaky laugh tumbling out of her mouth. Actually, it's Claire. Hello, Deidre said as she rushed over with outstretched arms. The two air-kissed one another. Deidre extended her hand to Julie, a warm smile flowing like honey over her lips. You must be Julie. I've heard so many wonderful things about you. Thank you, Julie said as they clasped hands. What brings you in today? Deidre asked. Claire spoke first. We're looking for something to go over Julie's mantle. Claire lifted her chin, her voice coated with displeasure. I suggested that we go with a Nolan Vant, but your employee was showing us other options. She motioned to Piper's prints. Surprise flashed over Deidre before her features tightened. Piper's face burned as her defense flew out of her mouth. Julie wanted something different from the norm, and asked for suggestions. She looked at Julie, hoping the woman would back her up, but Julie averted her eyes. Piper felt a combination of disappointment and frustration. The high-pitched laugh that rolled out of Deidre's throat sounded so syrupy and fake that it turned Piper's stomach. "I'm sorry, Claire." Deidre threw Piper a blistering look. "I guess we shouldn't leave the selection of art to the amateurs." "My thoughts exactly," Claire snipped, snubbing her nose at Piper. The hair on the back of Piper's neck bristled as she straightened to her full height. "You asked for a recommendation, and that's what I gave you." "I'm sure you did the best you could," Deidre said magnanimously. A rigid smile extended over her lips. "I need you to go and lend a hand to Scotty. He's getting some pieces ready to be shipped." Piper nodded, having no further desire to be around Claire or her spineless daughter. Deidre took Claire's arm. "Have you seen the newest collection by Nolan Vant?" "We looked at it when we first came in," Claire answered. "Let's go to the front and look at it again. I'm certain we can find you the perfect fit," Deidre purred. Piper stomped to the back where Scotty was, so livid she could spit nails. She could tell from the look on Scotty's face that he'd been listening to every word of the conversation. "Can you believe those people?" Piper seethed in a low tone, keenly aware of how easily sound traveled in the gallery. "Talk about hanging me out to dry," she muttered as she paced back and forth. "They asked for recommendations, so I gave them some." He shook his head. "I'm sorry, love. Unfortunately, some people aren't ready to break out of the norm." "Evidently not," she barked. She looked at the artwork Scotty was wrapping. "I thought you were putting out Nolan Vant's other pieces." He sighed. "A rush order came in while you were waiting on the divas." She giggled, her hand covering her mouth. "Here, let me help." As they worked to package the artwork, they could hear Deidre slathering on the charm. 30 minutes later, Claire and Julie left the gallery with a large framed Vant print. Piper figured it would only be a matter of minutes before Deidre came tromping into the back and chewed her out. Piper had spent the past 30 minutes deciding that she was not going to apologize for showing her own work. The bell over the front door chimed. Maybe not. Piper had been granted a stay of execution. They heard Deidre squeal, "Nolan, you brought me flowers." Piper and Scotty looked wide-eyed at one another. "I guess the lovebirds are making up," he said. By unspoken agreement, the two rushed to the doorway so they could peek into the gallery and get their first look at the elusive Nolan Vant. The first thing Piper saw was Deidre's blonde hair flying out behind her as she trotted across the room to Nolan. Then Piper saw him. Confusion battered her insides for an instant. Then, the situation became crystal clear as Deidre's lips connected with his. The air shot out of Piper's lungs in a hard thrust as she gasped. Her hand went to her neck. She couldn't breathe. "Are you okay?" Scotty asked. Her knees buckled as Scotty caught hold of her arm to prevent her from falling. She sucked in a ragged breath. "It's him," she managed to say. "Who?" Tears rushed to her eyes, her heart shattering into unrecognizable bits. "Noah Romeo, the guy I spent the day with yesterday." Chapter 7. Piper pressed pause and reluctantly pulled her eyes away from the movie playing on her computer screen as Corey came into the bedroom and sat down on the edge of the bed. "Are you doing okay?" Corey's expression was sympathetic, concerned. Piper pushed out a humorless laugh. "I'll survive." She dipped her spoon into the carton of mint chocolate chip ice cream, taking another mindless bite. After witnessing the scene with Deidre and Noah, Scotty urged her to go home. "I'll tell Deidre you went home sick," he said. Piper had stumbled home in a daze, where she spent a good hour bawling her eyes out. Then she got a good hard workout on Corey's treadmill, followed by a hot shower. After that, she put on her pajamas and started eating every morsel of junk food she could find in the cupboards and fridge. Piper felt betrayed, angry, her mind replaying in vivid detail all of the events from the day before. She could only imagine what Zoe and Noah must have been thinking when she went on her rant about Nolan Vant. She thought back to the amused looks passing between them, how Zoe said that Nolan could handle the criticism. It was apparent to Piper now that the two of them had been laughing at her the entire time. She didn't even know why she was so devastated by this. Hadn't the voice in her head warned her that Noah wasn't all he appeared to be? He'd flat out lied to her about his career. And worse, he pretended to care about her. All the while, he was a two-timer. Still, they had only spent one day together. Piper really shouldn't be this upset. Disappointed, maybe, ticked, but not devastated. Even as the thoughts rolled through her head, she knew the reason behind her dismay. For the first time, ever, she'd found a guy that she not only connected with, but the connection was magical. It had given her hope for a future that wasn't all about her career. She thought she'd found someone she could laugh with, someone to share her hopes and dreams, someone to eventually fall in love with. "Earth to Piper," Corey said. Piper blinked, pulling herself out of her thoughts. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I asked if you want to grab some dinner with me and Scotty." "Not hungry." She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7:15. She and Noah had planned to meet at the Italian restaurant at 7 p.m. Had Noah even bothered to show up? Maybe he was at the restaurant right now with Deidre. Piper's stomach churned, anger burning through her like poison. Her phone was in her purse, on silent. She hadn't checked her messages and didn't care to. Piper didn't want to hear from Noah Romeo ever again. "I'm so sorry," Corey began. Scotty had told Corey everything that happened, which was a relief because that meant Piper didn't have to rehash the sordid details. It was bad enough to be thinking about it over and over. She didn't want to talk about it. "It's okay." She forced a smile. "It happens to the best of us." Tears pressed behind her eyes, but Piper refused to let them fall. "Scotty said that after you left, Deidre took Nolan into her office for a closed-door meeting. When Nolan came out, he didn't look happy." Corey searched her face. "Maybe you should call Nolan? Hear his side of the story?" "No," she blurted, her eyes narrowing to slits. "I saw all I needed to see." The image of Deidre's lips locked with Noah's was seared into her memory. Acrid bitterness rose in her throat. If Noah were here, she'd slap him upside the head. "Deidre and Noah deserve each other," she spat. Corey took in a deep breath. "What are you gonna do? About Deidre and your job?" "I don't know." Her voice sounded fragile in her own ears. She tightened her grip on the ice cream carton. "I've worked too hard to just throw in the towel over a stupid guy." Her voice hardened. "At least I found out what he was right away without wasting any more time on him." "True," Corey conceded. "I still think you need to talk to him. Last night when you came in from your date, you were glowing." A white-hot anger scorched through Piper. "I was duped." So much for being spontaneous and starting a new relationship. She gritted her teeth, staring off into the distance. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "No, I just need to work this out within myself." Corey nodded in understanding. "Scotty's on his way to pick me up. I'll be back in a couple of hours." "Thanks," Piper croaked. The minute Corey left the room and closed the door, tears brimmed in Piper's eyes, rolling down her cheeks. How could this hurt so much? She swiped her runny nose as she pressed her keyboard to continue playing the movie. She took another bite of ice cream, hoping it would dull her senses. She looked at the computer screen, trying to force her mind to concentrate on the movie, desperately needing a diversion to crowd out the hurt. Noah stomped into the kitchen. pulled out a bar stool, and plopped down. Zoe was standing in front of the sink. "Hi there," she said in surprise. "I didn't expect you back until later." She reached for a dirty plate and rinsed it off before loading it into the dishwasher. "It's been one heck of a day," Noah grumbled, his dark mood intensifying. Zoe's eyes rounded. "Did something happen with Piper?" "You could say that." Her hand went to her hip. "What happened?" "Well, for starters, she stood me up for dinner." He bunched his brows. "Why? The two of you were getting along so well." He pushed out a hard laugh. "Because she's engaged, that's why." Zoe's jaw dropped. "What?" He raked a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I went to the gallery today to surprise her. Even brought flowers." His gut twisted as he gave Zoe a pained smile. "I decided to take your advice and not let any more time pass before I told Piper about the photography." When Noah had gotten back from taking Piper home the night before, Zoe was waiting for him. She reamed him for not being honest with Piper. Noah hadn't intended to deceive Piper. It was just nice having someone get to know him as plain old Noah Romeo, the real man behind the photography. "What happened when you got to the gallery?" Zoe prompted, resting her hand on the counter as she eyed him. "Deidre was up at the front when I came in. She thought the flowers were for her. She ran up and gave me a kiss." "On the lips?" "Yep." Zoe's eyes rounded to saucers. "Did Piper see this?" "No, she wasn't there." His eyes narrowed. "As it turns out, Piper left this morning with her fiancé to go to San Francisco." Noah felt like such a fool. How could he have been so wrong about Piper? The time they'd spent together yesterday had been extraordinary, and those kisses, their chemistry was off the charts. Zoe tipped her head, looking suspicious. "Who told you that Piper was engaged?" "Deidre." Her voice rose. "And you believed her?" "Well, yeah. Why would Deidre lie about something like that?" Zoe gave him an exasperated look. "Because she wants you for herself, that's why. You just said that Deidre thought the flowers were for her, and she put a lip lock on you." She rolled her eyes. "Hello? Surely you're not that oblivious to the ways of the opposite sex." He blew out a heavy breath, knowing that Zoe could see right through him. "Okay, I can tell that Deidre wishes we were still together, but we're not and never will be." At one time, Noah thought that he and Deidre might have something, but the attraction quickly fizzled. Deidre was beautiful and classy, but she was too much of a society girl for Noah. He preferred someone who was down to earth, someone approachable, someone like Piper. An image of Piper with her soulful brown eyes, lively smile, and dark curls flashed before his mind, twisting a knife into his heart. Noah loved Piper's passion. She was right about the photography. He'd been struggling with his craft for some time now, trying to recapture the fervor he once had. Hearing Piper talk about his work had awoken something inside Noah, making him believe that he could actually break out of the box and become truly great again. "Tell me everything that happened. You came into the gallery. Deidre kissed you. She told you Piper wasn't there. What happened next?" "We went to Deidre's office. She talked about the reception on Friday, assuring me that everything is set. Then she brought up the exclusive, wanting me to go ahead and sign another contract." Wariness seeped into Zoe's eyes. "Please tell me you didn't." "I told Deidre that I'm not making any decisions until after the holidays are over." She exhaled in relief. "Good. If you just open your gallery, it would solve a lot of problems," he moaned. "I know you can't stand Deidre, but if I don't sign with her, I'll have to sign with another gallery. Deidre and I are friends, and we'd have a comfortable working relationship. I'd rather sign with her than someone I don't know." "I don't trust that woman any farther than I can throw her." Zoe said darkly. I don't care what Deidre says. That woman does not have your best interest at heart. She's only looking out for herself. She waved a hand. Anyway, tell me the rest. After you talked about the exclusive, what happened? I asked if Piper was working. Deidre was surprised that I knew Piper. She started asking questions. One thing led to another, and I told Deidre about the day we spent together yesterday. He tightened his jaw. Deidre then told me that Piper is engaged and that she left town this morning. Zoe shook her head back and forth. That can't be right. Piper said she was spending Christmas in Sandy with her family. I believe her. If Piper was telling the truth, then why did she stand me up for dinner? A furrow dented her brows. Maybe she found out that you're Nolan Vant. She could be angry that you lied to her. She shot him a look of reproof. Not this again. He blew out a defeated breath. You're right. I should have told her, but you know why I didn't. She rolled her eyes. Because you wanted her to get to know you for you, she said, repeating the phrase he'd told her the night before. His voice rose an octave. Yes, is that so bad? You and I both know how tricky fame is. Look at Cash and all that he goes through, the press hounding him day and night. Cash is a country music superstar, Zoe retorted. His situation is different, and you know it. Their brother Cash was younger than Noah by 2 years. He was country music royalty. Cash's unprecedented success had changed the dynamics of the entire Romeo family. Noah was probably the most paranoid sibling about losing his privacy, which is why he was so careful about what got out to the public. He still wasn't sure it was smart to do the reception at the gallery this Friday, but Zoe had talked him into it, saying that it was time he came out of the shadows. I just wanted one day with Piper where she knew me as simply Noah. Was that too much to ask? Maybe. Have you tried calling Piper? He grunted. Calling, texting, nothing. It speaks volumes that she didn't show up tonight, and that she's avoiding my calls and texts. I'm sorry. Zoe's expression grew tender. You really like her, don't you? Yeah, I do, he huffed. I'm a sucker. A headache was spreading across the bridge of his nose. Maybe you should go to Piper's house and demand that she talk to you. She's not there, remember? She's in San Francisco. He couldn't believe Piper would just up and leave without telling him. According to Deidre. Noah didn't know what to think. Yesterday, everything clicked. He'd been on top of the world, and then everything imploded. At this point, he just wanted to get through the reception and hightail it back to Colorado. If Piper doesn't have the courtesy to even return my calls or texts, then I can only assume that she wants nothing more to do with me. What did you say on the calls and texts? I told her that we need to talk and asked her to contact me. Zoe nodded. Okay, that was good. Maybe you should give her time. Time for what? He asked dully. Zoe looked thoughtful. Let's say that Piper is engaged. The two of you met spontaneously. Maybe it threw her for a loop, and she's trying to figure out what to do. Noah wanted to laugh to keep from crying. While I appreciate your optimism, I don't think that's the case. Zoe frowned. Was Piper wearing a ring? No, she wasn't. Don't you find that odd? He threw up his hands. I don't know. Maybe. Zoe drummed her fingers on the countertop. I can tell from the way Piper looked at you that she's crazy about you. She pressed her lips together. I'm sorry, bro. Her eyes filled with a deep sadness. Maybe there is no such thing as happily ever after. Noah knew she was talking about her relationship with Carl. He wished there were some comforting words to give her, but he was too low right now to do so. He stood, the heavy weight of the situation settling in his gut like concrete. I'm turning in for the night. Where are the kids? In the basement, watching a movie. He offered a smile. Thanks for talking to me. You bet. She searched his face. Don't give up hope. Hold to the certainty you felt yesterday. I have to believe that things will work out for the best. He appreciated Zoe's intentions, but her words had a hollow ring. Thanks, sis, he said glumly as he stood and left the room. Chapter 8. The next morning, as Piper stepped into the gallery, she was surprised to find Deidre waiting for her. We need to have a long talk, Deidre said. Piper was sure Deidre was going to rake her over the coals for showing the customers her photos and then leaving work without an explanation. Okay, she said tonelessly, following Deidre to her office. Deidre sat down behind her desk. Before Piper could sit down, Deidre motioned, "Close the door." Piper did as instructed, her mind going 100 miles a minute. Would Deidre fire her? That would be par for the course. She clasped her hands together in her lap, waiting to see how this would play out. Deidre's hands formed a steeple as she assessed Piper. I know about you and Nolan. Piper's eyes bugged, her breath coming faster. You do? How? She sputtered. He told me. Piper's mind reeled. I don't understand. The wings of her heart flapped like a caged bird. Deidre let out a long sigh, pity coating her features. The day I went to the airport to pick up Nolan, well, the two of us had been fighting. Unbeknownst to me, he took an earlier flight. She spread her hands. I'm sorry to say this, but you were a distraction. Piper's chest squeezed. She went hot all over, then stone cold. In that moment, she hated Deidre Landon and Noah Romeo. Is there a point to this? Deidre sat back in her seat, a benign smile curving her lips. Of course. You're a good employee. For a second, Piper thought she hadn't heard Deidre correctly. I beg your pardon? I know it doesn't seem like it, but I appreciate everything you do. You work hard, and it shows. Piper was at a loss for words. It's about time you get the recognition you deserve. She sat up and used her index finger to slide a paper across the desk. What's that? Piper asked suspiciously. An exclusive for the Landon Gallery to represent your work, starting in January and running for an entire year. A startled laugh rattled Piper's throat. Are you serious? Yep. Deidre gave Piper an appraising look. Your photographs are good, and a promise is a promise. You'll notice that I already signed it. Piper reached for the paper and glanced over it. She turned it over to see Deidre's signature. After you sign it, we'll go to the bank and get it notarized, Deidre said. Piper's brow furrowed. What's the catch? There's no catch, Deidre responded lightly. I've been planning to do this for some time. After the thing with Nolan, I decided that now would be a good time. Do you need a few minutes to read over the contract before signing? Piper raised an eyebrow. I'll need more than a few minutes. She'd wanted this for so long. And now? Now it felt like some sort of twisted bribe. Piper was in no state to make any hard, fast decisions right now. Everything was happening too fast. I can give you my answer by Monday. Amusement flashed over Deidre's features. She paused, studying Piper. Okay, I'll allow that, but if you wait longer than Monday, the deal is off. Piper looked Deidre in the eye. Why are you being so understanding about Nolan? Doesn't it bother you that I spent the day with your boyfriend? Kissed him? Fury flashed in Deidre's eyes before a smile spread over her lips. You had no idea who Nolan was. You're the victim here. Her voice hardened. Well, I don't excuse Nolan. I understand that he was just using you to get back at me. Piper's mind scrambled to keep up. Are you saying that Nolan knew who I was? Deidre laughed. Of course. Why do you think he asked you to spend the day with him? He was trying to make me jealous. Piper could feel an inferno of heat gathering in her face. Her upper lip curled. If I were you, I'd think twice about being with a man who was so vindictive. Noah was nothing like Piper thought. The entire day with him was a sham. "You're right," Deidre admitted. There was a slight tremble in her voice as she continued. "The problem is that I love him." Piper wanted to vomit. "I hope it works out for you," she said stiffly. "Thank you," Deidre said with a gracious smile as she dabbed her eyes. Sensing the conversation was coming to a close, Piper stood. Deidre held up a finger. "One more thing." Piper braced herself for whatever was coming. "I'm giving you today and tomorrow off, with pay." She smiled contritely. "It's the least I can do for all the angst you've been through." An incredulous laugh worked its way up Piper's throat as she swallowed it back down. This whole thing was whacked. What about the reception? "No worries, I'll get Gail Finley to fill your slot. You just enjoy your days off. You deserve it." "Okay, thanks." Her voice dribbled off as she paused. "I guess I'll see you on Monday." Deidre stood and held out her hand. "Here's to the start of a great business relationship." Piper paused a fraction of a second before reaching for Deidre's hand. "I'll let you know my decision on Monday," she reiterated. "Sounds great. Merry Christmas," Deidre called out as Piper left the office. Piper had just been handed her life's dream on a silver platter. She should be overjoyed right now. Why did she get the feeling she'd just been played? Corey's eyes bulged. "She offered you an exclusive?" "Yep, sure did." Corey's head swiveled back and forth. "And 2 days off?" "With pay," Piper inserted. The two of them were sitting at the kitchen table in their house. Piper had been anxiously waiting all day for Corey to get off work and come home so she could deliver her news. Corey's shocked expression came as no surprise. Piper was still flabbergasted about the whole thing, too. She kept rolling it around in her head and ending up at the same place she started. A couple hours ago, Piper finally mustered up the courage to listen to the message Noah had left the evening before. It was short and to the point. All he said was, "We need to talk. Call me." Hearing his voice had brought tears to her eyes and an ache to her heart. It was so hard to believe that the same man speaking was the jerkface who'd used her. Her mind just couldn't merge the two. She looked at Corey. "What's your opinion about all of this?" Piper had finally come to the conclusion that this was too much for her to handle on her own. She needed Corey's perspective. Corey's mouth worked as she tipped her head thoughtfully. "Well, the first thought that comes to mind is that Deidre's paying you off." An invisible string laced Piper's insides up tight. "Yeah, I got that feeling too." She made a face. "But paying me off for what?" Corey gave her an astute look. "So that you'll stay out of her way." Piper nibbled at her lower lip. "I've thought about that, but Noah obviously told her that he spent the day with me, otherwise how would Deidre know? Maybe Noah broke up with her because he met you." It was crazy how fast hope sprouted in Piper's breast. She squashed it flat before it could take root. "But I saw them kissing. He brought her flowers." Hurt washed over her. Corey spread her hands. "From what Scotty described, the two of you were in the back watching from a distance. Is it possible that you could have misread the situation?" Piper ran this scenario through her mind. She'd been so shocked, so stunned. At this point, it was hard to say which sections of the puzzle Piper actually saw, and which sections her beleaguered brain had filled in. "I don't know," she lamented, pulling her fingers through her hair. Earlier, after Piper's tears had run dry, she'd found herself on her knees praying for clarity and direction, and she was still as confused as ever. "This is Deidre Landon we're talking about." Corey leaned forward. "You've been concerned that Deidre would cheat you out of the reception she promised, and now she's giving you an exclusive? The whole thing's fishy. Deidre doesn't want you to go to that reception because she doesn't want you to talk to Noah. I have no desire to talk to Noah Romeo, Piper spouted. Corey arched an eyebrow. You sure about that? Of course I'm sure, she said hotly. He's a cheating jerk. He and Deidre deserve each other. She balled her fist. I should be thanking him. Because of his antics, Deidre's giving me an exclusive. Once my work gets out to the masses, I can write my own ticket. Her voice trembled with intensity. I've worked so hard for this. We should be celebrating right now, she finished irritably. And yet we're not, Corey said sagely. She searched Piper's face. You're crazy about Noah. A lump formed in Piper's throat. I hate his rotten guts, she said vehemently. Corey chuckled. I rest my case. Tears gathered in Piper's eyes. Regardless of Deidre's motivation, she's giving me a chance to make something out of my career. She clenched her teeth. If I turn the deal down, I won't get another opportunity like this. My career's important to me. Is that so wrong? She glared at Corey, daring her to disagree. Corey didn't flinch. If you let Noah Romeo walk out of your life without a fight, you'll end up alone and miserable like my father. She blew out a breath. He put his lifeblood into his business, neglecting my mother and us kids. Her voice hitched. Do you know what he told me on his birthday last month? Piper shook her head no. Corey's eyes misted. He said that he would give anything to be able to go back and do things differently. Regret shadowed her features. Unfortunately, it's too late. Mom has moved on and remarried. Her expression grew pleading. Don't let that happen to you. Piper huffed out a humorless laugh. Noah and I had one perfect day together. Anger kneaded her insides. And surprise, surprise, it turns out it wasn't so perfect after all. She swallowed the bitterness rising in her throat. You owe it to yourself and to Noah to go to that reception and confront him. Piper's eyebrows shot up. Why? So I can call him a low-down, cheating slimeball to his face? No, thank you, she said tartly. I think I'll take door number 2, sign my exclusive, and ride off into the sunset. Corey sat back and folded her arms over her chest. Okay, if that's your decision. She paused, eyeing Piper. I just hope you can live with that. Yep, I can. She could tell from the doubtful look on Corey's face that she didn't believe a word. Heck, Piper didn't even believe it. She groaned. I'm a disaster. Piper had been absolutely miserable all day. Didn't that speak volumes? It had come as a revelation to her that as much as she wanted her career, there was one thing she wanted more. If I were a betting girl, I'd say that Deidre is lying. Think about it. She offers you an exclusive and 2 days' pay to get you out of the picture. If she weren't threatened by you, she wouldn't do that. If she and Noah were truly an item, Deidre would be fighting mad that he cheated on her with another woman. Corey's eyebrow shot up. And, considering that woman is you, she tisked her tongue, well, you would be public enemy number 1, and Deidre would have shown you the door faster than you can blink. The words came at Piper like a shaft of sunlight splitting leaden clouds. You're right. Why hadn't she thought of it that way? Her heart pumped faster. Piper had known something was off today during the meeting. She was just too distraught to figure out what. Corey was right. Deidre was not an understanding person by any stretch of the imagination. Something else came to her mind. Scotty overheard Deidre on the phone talking to one of her friends. Deidre said she'd fight for Noland to the bitter end. Sounds like that's exactly what Deidre's doing. Corey's lips pressed into taut lines. Piper's brows bunched. It ticks me off how people like Deidre can do so many terrible things and come out unscathed. It's called life, Corey said dryly. Piper squared her jaw. It's still not fair. No, it isn't, Corey agreed, a glum silence settling between them. Corey stroked her chin. What if there was a way to expose Deidre for what she is? Piper's insides perked with interest. What do you mean? I'm not exactly sure yet. Let me think about it a little more, maybe get some input from Scotty. We'll see what we can come up with. In the meantime, you need to focus on getting your man back. Corey reached across the table and placed her hand over Piper's, squeezing it. Piper cleared the frog in her throat. Do you really think Noah cares about me? Corey smiled, removing her hand. Yeah, I do. That's how this whole thing looks to me. Piper's heart seesawed up. Oh, how she wanted to believe that. She frowned, misgivings tugging at her stomach. What if you're wrong? I could lose the deal of a lifetime. What if I'm right? You could lose the potential love of a lifetime. The air stilled as Piper contemplated the question. You think I should go to the reception and confront Noah? Yes. Piper's fingers tapped a fast beat against the table. Even as she contemplated what she would do, her heart already knew that her path was set. She had to go and see this through. She had to see Noah again, talk to him face to face. That was the only way she was going to get any peace. Okay, I'll go. The minute the words left her mouth, Piper felt a swell of relief as the darkness inside her dissipated a fraction. Woohoo! Corey shouted, springing from her chair. She did a victory dance around the kitchen. We are going to the reception tomorrow night, she sang. A couple seconds later, she touched her finger to her lips, giving Piper a calculated look. The first order of business is to find you something spectacular to wear. Piper frowned. How about my black dress? It was her standby, the one she wore to all of the receptions. Oh no, Corey's head swiveled back and forth. That won't do. She pursed her lips, studying Piper as if she were a statue or mannequin that Corey was about to dress up. I'll take off work tomorrow. We'll go to Salt Lake City. You remember my friend Lois Myers? She works at a formal wear boutique. I'm sure she can find us something. Her eyes sparkled. By the time I'm finished with you, Noah won't be able to resist you. Excitement simmered through Piper's veins. Let's do it. A warm feeling of peace flooded through her, bringing with it a feeling of resolve. She'd made her decision. For better or worse, there was no turning back. Chapter 9. Piper sucked in a breath, trying to calm her nerves, which were jarring her insides like an earthquake. Corey caught her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. You got this. A sassy smirk twitched her lips. Remember to stand up straight, hold your stomach in, and show him that Piper Kell is a force to be reckoned with. Yes, Mother, Piper said tartly as she grinned a little. She knew what Corey was doing, teasing to put her at ease. It was working, somewhat. Ever since they'd left the house, Piper kept repeating the same prayer over and over. Please, help me to be bold and say everything that needs to be said. And please help me find a way back to Noah. Piper had felt it today, the calm stirring in her soul that she was doing the right thing. Her brain argued that it was madness to throw away the deal of a lifetime on the gamble that a man she'd spent a single day with felt the same way about her as she did him. However, her gut feelings argued otherwise. They were at the back entrance of the gallery. Piper pushed her key into the lock, turning it. Her hand paused on the metal door handle. Am I doing the right thing? Absolutely. Corey looked her up and down. You look fantastic, if I do say so myself. Thanks, Piper responded as she looked down at the red dress and matching heels. She felt like Cinderella going to the ball. No, that wasn't true. She felt more like Queen Esther from the Bible, going to plead her case before the king. It had worked out well for Esther. Piper could only hope and pray that it would work out well for her. Corey adjusted a tendril of Piper's hair. There. she said like she was putting the finishing touch on her masterpiece. Piper's curls were piled on top of her head with ringlets hanging down. Piper's favorite part of the ensemble were the faux ruby dangly earrings. Just stick to the plan, and all will be well. Scotty and I have your back. She took in a deep breath. Okay. With a surprising resoluteness that seemed to come from someplace outside of herself, Piper opened the door as they went inside. The aroma of fragrant bread and something cheesy filled the air. The reception had been going for 30 minutes already. Piper and Corey made their way through the back area used for shipping. When they got to the doorway leading into the main area of the gallery, Corey touched Piper's arm. I'm off. She looked Piper in the eye. You do your thing. Piper steeled her shoulders, nodding. She surveyed the room, brimming with people holding cocktail glasses and plates filled with appetizers. The low murmur of conversations rumbled just above the background instrumental Christmas music being piped over the speakers. She couldn't see Noah from this vantage point. He was probably standing in the corner section by the entrance. That's where most artists and photographers remain during a reception. She strode into the gallery, offering polite smiles to those she passed. Rather than going up to the front, Piper lingered near the back, trying to set her sights on Deidre. She spotted Corey, gliding across the room to reach her destination. Bingo. Corey stepped up to Deidre and placed a hand on her arm. The two chatted amicably for a couple minutes before turning and coming in this direction. Piper's pulse picked up its pace as she moved to stand near a particular collection. You're gonna love the newest pieces from the Rutledge collection, Piper heard Deidre say. I'm sure I will, Corey replied. Deidre stopped in her tracks when she saw Piper, her face turning the color of chalk. Piper met Deidre's startled gaze as the two women eyed one another. Is everything okay? Corey asked in a puzzled tone. A silky smile draped over Deidre's lips as she turned to Corey. Will you excuse me for a minute? Of course. Deidre marched up to Piper, nostrils flaring. What are you doing here? She seethed. I thought we agreed that you weren't coming to the reception. Piper locked eyes with the slippery snake. I guess you could say that I had a change of heart. What are you talking about? Deidre hissed in a low tone, the veins in her neck cording. Piper glanced around and spoke in a loud tone. Would you prefer to discuss this here or in your office? Deidre rocked back, her jaw falling open the instant before she drew herself up, shooting Piper such a scorching glare that it could burn through metal. You sure you want to do this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Piper heaved back. Okay, it's your funeral, Deidre said nastily. Piper motioned with her head. Shall we? When they got to Deidre's office, they met Scotty coming out. What do you think you're doing? Deidre demanded. Scotty looked wide-eyed between Deidre and Piper before holding up the catalog in his hand. A customer wanted to see the Summerdale collection. That's the Winsome collection, Deidre corrected. A sheepish grin stole over Scotty's lips. Oops. Give me just 1 second. He darted back into the office and came back out with the right catalog. Thanks, he quipped, hurrying away. They stepped into the office as Deidre closed the door behind them. Rather than sitting, they stood. Deidre grunted, giving her blonde hair a flick of her wrist. Okay, say your spiel, but you'd better make it snappy because I've got people waiting. She glared at Piper like she was a loathsome bug. For starters, I don't believe anything you said about Nolan Vant. He didn't spend the day with me to make you jealous. He spent the day with me because he cares about me the same way I care about him. A hard amusement cloaked Deidre's features as she let out a disparaging laugh. That's absurd. Nolan was just using you to get to me. I don't believe that. Piper caught the slight hesitation in Deidre's eyes and knew in that moment that Corey was right. Deidre had lied about the whole whole thing. It sent a tidal wave of elation cresting over her. Furthermore, it's detestable that you would try and bribe me with an exclusive contract and then offer me paid time off so I wouldn't come here tonight and tell Nolan the truth. Her voice shook with fury. You know how devoted I am to this gallery and my career. I've put up with your crap, working hard to prove myself in the slim hope that you would keep your word and hold a reception to showcase my work. You twisted everything around to control me and Nolan so you can get what you want. You're despicable, Deidre snorted. And you're a naive fool. I gave you the chance of a lifetime and you're throwing it down the toilet. For what? Some pathetic crush on Nolan. You know what? I should be thanking you for giving me a chance to do a thorough self-examination. As much as I want my career to be successful, I realize now that I don't want it like this. She swallowed, her eyes misting. I met a wonderful man, and we have a magical connection, something that only comes along once in a lifetime. No amount of success can compensate for a missed chance at love. I won't let you or anyone else come between me and Nolan. A look of triumph flashed in Deidre's eyes, her voice going cashmere soft. Nolan was so disappointed when he learned that you were engaged. Piper frowned. I'm not engaged. Her eyebrow arched. Is that what you told Nolan? He'll never be able to trust you again. Good thing I'll be there to help him pick up the pieces. Deidre's eyes narrowed. You're fired. And in case you're thinking of trying to get a job at another gallery, you can kiss that option goodbye. I'll slander your name to the point where no one will dare touch you, much less represent your work. In other words, you'll lie. Deidre let out a derisive chuckle. What are you, a Girl Scout? She got up in Piper's face. No one cares about the truth. All they care about is status. People think what I want them to think. She gave Piper a superior look. You know it's true. Look at all the suckers who come in here and buy exactly what I tell them to buy. I prefer to think of the people who come into this gallery as clients who are searching for pieces that will lift and inspire them, Piper said evenly, stepping back and going toward the door. You're a fool! Deidre caught hold of Piper's arm, her long fingernails digging into Piper's flesh. Where are you going? This conversation isn't over. Oh, I believe it is. I've said all I wanted to say to you. Take your hand off me. Her eyes blazed. Now! Deidre removed her hand, an edge of panic slipping into her voice. What are you going to do? Make a scene? Piper opened the door. No, I think I'll leave that to you. You seem to be doing a pretty good job of it. Deidre's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? If you so much as glance in Nolan's direction, I'll call the police and have your butt hauled off to jail. We're done here, Piper muttered as she walked out of the office. Deidre followed on her heels. Do you really think that Nolan will choose you over me? I'd say it's a good assumption, a male voice said. A soft gasp rose in Piper's throat as she stopped. There he was, looking magnificent in a black turtleneck sweater and black trousers. A group of people were gathered behind him. Because I do choose you, Noah continued, his gaze holding Piper's. Joy bubbled in Piper's chest, tears rushing to her eyes. What is this? Deidre stammered. Scotty stepped forward, waving the catalog back and forth with a taunting grin. You really should pay more attention to your intercom system. Deidre's face drained, her hand going to her chest. She looked at Piper. Were we on speaker? Yep. Every last word of our conversation was broadcast over the intercom to the entire gallery, Piper answered. All those suckers in this gallery heard every word you said, Zoe piped in as she stepped up beside Noah, folding her arms over her chest. Deidre's face caved as she let out a shriek and darted out the back. Noah stepped up to Piper, a large grin overtaking his lips as he took hold of her hands. That was interesting. Yes, it was. You gave up an exclusive for me. His jaw worked. That's huge. She swallowed as she peered up into his handsome face. Did you mean what you said? About choosing me? Yes, ma'am, he drawled with an exaggerated southern twang. In a swift motion, he encircled an arm around her waist, pulling her close. You look incredible, by the way, he murmured. Her blood warmed. So do you. A crooked grin tugged at his lips. I fixed my hair. I can tell. The sizzle between them was electric. I'm so glad you're not engaged, he uttered in relief. Me too, she agreed with a chuckle. He smelled great, a hint of mint mixed with a clean masculine scent. His expression grew serious, intense. We shared one perfect day together, but that's not enough. I want countless perfect days with you. The significance of his words settled into her heart, her eyes growing moist. They won't all be perfect, she said practically. No, they'll be messy, raw, and real. His hazel eyes glittered gold. But they'll be with you. That's good enough for me, he said as his lips came down on hers. Wild applause sounded in the background, but Piper barely noticed for the sound of her own galloping heart and the sublime feel of Noah's lips against hers consumed her attention. Chapter 10. 1 month later. Wait for it. I don't think the sun is ever gonna rise, Piper said sleepily as she suppressed a yawn. She pulled her side of the blanket tighter around her as she scooted close to Noah, trying to get warm. They were in the canyon, sitting in camp chairs on a ridge that overlooked a snow-covered valley that was impressive even in the twilight of the morning. Patience, Noah countered with a laugh. A wicked grin slid over her lips as she turned to him. Don't you already have enough sunrise collections? What is this, daybreak number 14? Ha ha, funny, he said, nudging her. We need some new material for the gallery. She blinked. Gallery? A proud smile filled his face. Yep, I found a location. A couple doors down from the chocolate shop where Corey works. Piper's voice rose. That's fantastic. Her brows furrowed as she searched his face. Wait a minute. You're not doing this for me, are you? The past month, she and Noah had been nearly inseparable. It was glorious, with them savoring every delicious moment together. However, Piper only had enough savings to last through February and was starting to look for a job. As much as Piper wanted to stay in Park City, she didn't know if that was an option. Like a cunning cat who'd used up her first life and was determined to hold on to the other 8, Deidre had picked herself up from the reception disaster and was making good on her promise to slander Piper's name. Noah was so kind and generous, but Piper never wanted to take advantage of that. She wouldn't put it past him to open up a gallery just to give her and Scotty jobs. I'm not doing it for you. She raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? I'm doing it for us. He threw her a dazzling smile that sent her heart skittering. Piper could go all day long on that smile. It was breathtaking. She snapped out of her daze, realizing that Noah was speaking. Of course, we'll need someone to help fill in when we travel to all sorts of obscure locations around the globe, searching for the perfect subjects for those edgy, raw pieces. His eyes twinkled with mirth. Do you think we could convince Scotty to pull away from his waiter job and come to work for us? She giggled. I'm sure Scotty could be persuaded. When you say us, are you referring to me and you? She held her breath, awaiting his answer. His features took on a contemplative expression. Well, I need a place to showcase my photos, as do you. A grin tugged at his lips. I can't think of a better partner in crime than someone who doesn't mind telling me like it is, someone who pushes me to be better. He scrunched his brows together in mock consternation. Would you happen to know where I could find a partner like that? Happiness bubbled in her chest. I think I might be able to suggest someone. Her heart swelled so large that she thought it might pop out of her chest. Her eyes settled on his lips as she leaned in for a long kiss that sent her blood pumping faster. No matter how much or long she kissed Noah, she could never get enough. It just kept getting better and better. A few minutes later, they stood, side by side, their eyes pressed to the viewfinders of their cameras as they waited for the sunrise. "Would you look at that?" Noah exclaimed as the bright splendor of the sun peeked above the horizon. They snapped a few photos. In fact, Piper was still taking pictures when Noah grabbed her around the waist. Laughing in surprise, she lowered her camera, lifting her chin to look into his eyes. "I thought we were taking pictures." A playful grin pulled at his lips. "We are." He smashed his lips to hers as he snapped a picture. He pulled back. "This is our new collection." "Oh, what's it called? Stolen Kisses?" she teased. His eyes moved over her face with such tenderness that she thought her heart would melt. "Fallen in love at sunrise." She blinked. "Love?" "That's right. I'm in love with you." Piper never knew that life could be this good. A smile curved her lips. "I like the sound of that. And for the record, I'm in love with you too." Joy overtook Noah's features as he flashed a large, radiant smile. "You know what I call this?" "What?" "The start of another perfect day." Epilogue. Zoe Romeo. It was a blissful evening, the perfect way to celebrate the love of two of Zoe's favorite people. At the request of the happy couple, Zoe had recommended the reception hall and caterer. She was glad everything was going according to plan. She sighed wistfully as she looked at Noah and Piper. They were in the center of the room, surrounded by throngs of wedding guests. But from the way they were looking at one another, they might as well have been the only two people in the world. Noah was gazing tenderly into Piper's eyes as he held her in his arms, navigating her around the dance floor. Piper looked exquisite in her wedding dress. It was elegant, with clean-cut lines that enhanced Piper's beauty. She wore her chestnut curls part up and part down. The wedding ceremony had brought a rush of emotion in Zoe's chest, misting her eyes. The total and complete love that Noah and Piper felt for one another, their undying commitment, that's how it should be. How Zoe's wedding might have been, had things been different. With a steel resolve that she'd perfected over the years, she shifted her thoughts from what might have been to what actually was as she began mentally listing all of her blessings, starting with her two wonderful children. Her heart softened as she looked at the kids' table off to the side of the reception hall, where her youngest, Madison, was bent over, her tongue cocked outside her mouth as she colored vigorously. Milo was at the buffet table, loading up his plate with what had to be a third or fourth helping of food. She grinned, thinking of how Milo had a hollow leg. He'd enjoyed spending the day around his uncles, whom he absolutely adored. As the oldest, Zoe had been the first of the Romeo clan to get married. It was nice to now add Noah to the club. The music thrummed through Zoe's veins, making her want to get up and dance. Where was Carl? With a heavy sigh, she leaned over to her purse resting beside her feet, retrieved her phone, and punched in yet another message to him. "Where are you?" She waited. No response. Swallowing her disappointment, she told herself that she really shouldn't be surprised. Carl hadn't answered her other 3 texts. Why would he suddenly answer this one? It was awkward and lonely being here by herself without her husband. Carl ran a real estate coaching business. As rotten luck would have it, an emergency had come up right before the wedding. One of Carl's best clients threatened to pull out and demanded a meeting. While Zoe understood that emergencies happened, she couldn't help but wonder if Carl had secretly wanted to miss the wedding. After all, Carl and Zoe's family were like oil and water. The current song ended and another began. More happy couples dancing. "Hey, you." Zoe's best friend Kate clopped toward her, wearing a large smile. Kate's straight dark hair bounced against her thin shoulders as she plopped down in the chair beside Zoe with a loud groan. "My feet are killing me. Why did you let me wear new pumps?" She slipped off her shoes and began rubbing the soles of her feet. Zoe chuckled. "At the rate you've been tearing up the dance floor, I'm surprised it's only your feet that are hurting." Kate's eyes sparkled. "Your brother's quite the dancer." "Which one?" Zoe asked drolly. "You've been dancing with so many of them that I can hardly keep count." "Mason was the one I was referring to." Kate sat up in her chair, a shrewd expression overtaking her pretty face. "Does somebody need a hug?" she purred. "No, thanks," Zoe clipped as she folded her arms over her chest. "Is this about Carl?" Kate asked. "You'd think he would realize how much I needed him here today." She swallowed to stay the emotion rising in her throat. Kate touched her arm. "Hey, I'm sure he'll be here. Didn't he say he'd come as soon as he got everything taken care of at work?" "He did, but I've been texting, and he hasn't responded." A low chuckle sounded in Kate's throat. "What?" Zoe demanded, her brows tugging together. "You know how bad Carl is about checking his phone," she huffed. "Yeah, I know." Her jaw worked as she collected her thoughts. "It just would have been nice to have him here today." Kate searched her face. "You've got me." Zoe felt herself soften as she looked at her best friend. "I know." She offered a slight smile. "It means the world to me that you would come and help me with everything." Zoe and Kate had arrived early at the church this morning to ensure that all plans were in order. They'd left the church right after the wedding ceremony and hightailed it over to the reception center to check on the caterer. Zoe was acting as a quasi-wedding coordinator for Noah and Piper. Not that they couldn't afford to hire an actual wedding planner, because they could, 1,000 times over. Rather, Zoe had volunteered. It gave her something purposeful to do, and she enjoyed being integrally involved in her brother's special day. "So," Kate began, "your brothers are easy on the eyes." Amusement swirled in Zoe's stomach. "Oh yeah, which one?" "All of them?" Kate trilled out a throaty chuckle. Talk about a kid in a candy store. Wow. Zoe just rolled her eyes. Kate's words were an all-too-familiar refrain. Every female on the planet, it seemed, was enamored with Zoe's brothers. She shouldn't have been surprised by Kate's reaction, considering she was twice divorced. Kate swore up and down that she wasn't getting married a third time, but Zoe suspected that Kate longed to find someone. Zoe didn't blame her. However, she'd learned that it wasn't about merely finding someone as much as it was about finding the right someone. Your brothers are also different. Take Jackson, for example. He's the shameless flirt. Boy, has he got that bad boy cowboy vibe down to an art. Amen to that, Zoe retorted. He could sweep me away on a white horse any time, Kate babbled on. Then there's Ramsey. You know, I don't think I would have pegged him as a special forces guy. Which branch of the military was he in? The Navy. He's a retired SEAL. He now works for a private security group. How romantic, Kate cooed. She paused only a fraction of a second before rushing on. Noah is definitely the artist, or rather, the photographer. Kate made a point of looking out on the dance floor. He certainly seems to have met his match. Yes, he has, Zoe smiled. The two of them are so happy. A pang went through her. She wanted that happiness. To have a companion she could share everything with. Where had she and Carl gone so wrong? She realized Kate was still jabbering 100 miles an hour. She forced herself to focus on what Kate was saying. Cash I can't figure out. He's charming and gorgeous with those striking green eyes and messy hair, but he's also guarded, Yep, that's what being a superstar will do to you. Zoe couldn't imagine what life must be like for Cash. He was constantly surrounded by bodyguards. As a precaution, since Cash was attending the wedding and reception, Noah had hired a team of security personnel to make sure that the press, overeager fans, or any other unwanted persons stayed away. Zoe had feared that the security team would take away from the wedding. Thankfully, however, they had kept a low profile. I wish Cash would take the stage, Kate said dreamily. I'm sure he would have, had Noah asked him to, but it's probably better that he didn't. This isn't about Cash, but about Noah and Piper. Oh, yes, I totally get that. She paused. Still, I would have loved to see him perform. Okay, girl, take the stars out of your eyes, Zoe warned. Kate laughed. Sorry, I'm just crushing right now. After all, it's not every day that a girl gets to rub shoulders with country music royalty. Do you think he knows Garth Brooks or George Strait? Probably. Wow, she drawled. What must his life be like? Lonely, probably. Really? Kate's expression was befuddled. Yeah, it would be hard to spend several months of the year on tour. I suppose you're right. Kate lowered her voice. Whatever happened with him and Hartley Rains? Didn't they used to be a couple? Yeah, but that was eons ago. Hartley and Cash had gotten their start in the music business around the same time. Cash had fallen hard for Hartley, but she broke his heart. Cash put everything into his career, and the effort had catapulted him to stardom. But Zoe could tell that Cash was lacking something in his life, a certain something that could only be found through another loving person, fully and completely. The kind of love that Noah and Piper had. The kind of love Zoe had once. Kate tipped her head, looking thoughtful. You know which brother is my favorite? Mason. Zoe's eyes widened. Mason? Yeah, I love his wit. He says the funniest things. As the baby in the family, Mason was always stirring the pot. Mason's not nearly as funny as he thinks he is, Zoe said dryly. Well, I think he's adorable. I could just eat him up. I'll bet all the college girls swoon over him. Zoe pushed out a breath. Can we please talk about something else? As the only girl with 5 brothers, Zoe had it up to her ears in testosterone. Even so, she dearly loved her brothers. She just didn't like hearing her best friends salivating over them. Okay, party pooper. A second later, Kate remarked, Your parents are fabulous dancers. Zoe looked at the two of them twirling expertly on the dance floor. Yes, they are. Her daddy was strong and tall, his features as chiseled as Clint Eastwood's. Her mama looked like $1,000,000 in her stylish dress, glossy blonde hair flying out behind her with every movement. Kate sighed. They're the perfect couple. So much in love. I would give anything to have had a marriage last as long as theirs. They have each other and beautiful kids. Surprised laughter bubbled in Zoe's throat. What? Kate asked. Can I not talk about your parents either? She grumbled. Sure, it's just that my parents aren't together. Kate's jaw dropped. Huh? She looked at them. Those two are smitten with one another. I won't argue with you there, but they're not together. They got divorced when I was in high school. Now they're best friends. It's complicated, she added when she saw Kate's puzzled expression. Kate's head swiveled back and forth. Okay, I don't know what to say about that. I'm glad they're in a good place. Me too. A few beats passed before Kate looked at Zoe. Hey, I don't mean to pry, but what was your dad saying to you earlier? Zoe tensed. What do you mean? She asked carefully. Right before the reception started, I heard you two in the kitchen. She sucked in a quick breath and let it out slowly. Daddy was asking why Carl wasn't at the wedding. Actually, Daddy had said a few choice words about Carl, calling him a cream puff and saying that Zoe would have been so much better off if she'd just stayed in Franklin and married Briggs. Zoe certainly had not appreciated that line of talk, and she let Daddy know it in no uncertain terms. Did you tell him about Carl's work emergency? Yeah, but that didn't sit well with Daddy. He thought it was an excuse for Carl to get out of coming. Zoe was starting to think Daddy was right. That's ridiculous, Kate countered. Zoe turned, surprised at the bite in Kate's voice. You think so? Of course I think so. Carl would have been here if he could. He works so hard to take care of the business. Yes, I suppose he does. Maybe Zoe was being too hard on Carl. He seemed genuinely rattled by the potential loss of one of his biggest clients. Then again, the timing was suspicious. Today of all days, and Carl had to be away. Her insides rattled with hurt. Why couldn't Carl see that she needed him, especially today? Kate gave her a long look. You don't agree? Zoe shrugged. I'm not sure what to think anymore. Her eyes collected moisture as she swallowed. Carl has never gotten along with my family. He's been dreading the wedding and reception. I'm sure a part of him was relieved that the work emergency came up. Kate touched her arm. Zoe, Carl loves you. I'm sure he would be here if he could. I hope you're right. She offered an appreciative smile. Tenderness welled inside her as she looked at her best friend. I'm glad you're here. Me too, Kate smiled. The reception rolled on with the cutting of the cake, the heartfelt toasts, the father and daughter dance. All the while, the anger in Zoe mounted. No Carl. After the happy couple had their grand send-off, complete with sparklers and bubbles, Zoe was about to go back into the reception hall to make sure everything was wrapped up when Kate tugged on her arm. Well, look who's here, she chimed. The handsome devil himself. Zoe turned to see Carl striding up to her. Hey, hun, he said as his lips grazed her cheek. What did I miss? Zoe's heart cracked with equal parts of anger and hurt as one word left her lips. Everything. This has been One Perfect Day, Romeo Family Romance, Book 1, written by Jennifer Youngblood, narrated by Majel Connery. Copyright 2019 by Jennifer Youngblood. Production copyright by Jennifer Youngblood.